Hello and welcome finally back again to Doctor Who Book Club. I've been putting off this episode for a while, admittedly. I've been wanting to record it. I read these comics a while back, and then I decided I was going to do the first season of Doctor Who instead. And then I was like, okay, I got to record this. And then I was like, it's been a little while. Like, I should probably reread these. And then I just didn't want to. And I put it off for a long time to the point where I was like, now I legitimately have to reread them. So that's where we're at. I reread them, but I do think one of my big worries about this episode is I don't know that there's that much to say about the Doctor Who comics. Basically, the first question here is what is this? This is something called TV Comics. TV Comics was basically a magazine back in the 60s and before, and probably a little later. I think it was around for a while, but TV Comics were mostly based off of television properties, and they were just comic books based off of television properties. That's basically all they are. Doctor Who is probably one of the more significant comics that ran within TV Comics, and it ran for a while, but it didn't start until... specifically, this is the first story. This is the Klepton Parasites. And this is the first Doctor Who TV comic, and it started in issue 674 of TV Comics. So as you can imagine, there's a whole bunch of those with a lot of shows that don't really, haven't really lasted, the test of time, I guess. Let me look up. So they had Tom and Jerry. Apparently, they had something based off the Avengers, and not the Marvel comic property, the Avengers. But there was a British crime drama called The Avengers back in the '60s, and they had a comic book that's probably most comparable to Doctor Who, I would guess. The Lone Ranger. Star Trek. Did I say Star Trek already? They had a bunch of stuff, but it seems like to me that the most significant was Doctor Who, which started in issue 674. And this is the Klepton Parasites. Now, the thing is, originally I was going to cover these story by story, but problem with that is there's that much to say about these, okay? So I'm going to cover all of the ones that were released basically in 1965. Klepton Parasites actually started in 64. And carried over into 65. But the last one, Sharkbait, ended in December of 1965. That's the last one we're going to cover. But yeah, I wanted to just cover all of these kind of broadly because I feel like I said, there's just not that much to say about them. So there's a couple of things of significance to say about the Klepton Parasites. This is the very first TV comic. It's 20 issues long. It's the longest one we're going to talk about. For some reason, with the very first one, they decided to make it a full-length comic, like a Silver Age comic. The way these were printed, though, was 2 pages per issue. So you'll see here, page 1 has the title card, Doctor Who, and then page 2 just continues, but then you get to page 3, and you got a new title card. That's because each issue only had 2 pages worth of comics. So you had to actually wait out several issues in order to get a full, complete story, which I think is part of the reason they decided to make their stories a lot shorter, because 20 pages is 10 issues, and over the course of I believe this is basically weekly. I think this was released. 10 weeks, that's 3 months. They have to wait to finish a complete story. Nobody's gonna care for that long, but yes, you might think this is the most compelling, complete story. I don't know if that's true. I don't think I necessarily believe that. First of all, what is this? Klepton Parasites, I feel like, is... So, a little bit of history. The TV comics did not actually have the rights to the Daleks, which, again, were the most popular thing in Doctor Who at this point. They didn't have the rights to it. Those were owned by an entirely different comic, which we will cover later. They had the sole rights to the Daleks. So this story definitely seems to basically be a Dalek story, but without the Daleks. And so they replaced them with these new aliens called the Kleptons. This is a Klepton here. They're just evil aliens. They're not very nice. There is like a little bit of a history that they have. Their planet apparently flew too close to the sun, or drew too close to the sun. I don't really know how that happens, but that happened, and then their population started to die off. And so they come to this new planet. I don't know if the planet is named. I don't think it is. But they start to enslave these people called the Thanes, and basically put them in like their reactor to like power their stuff. They have like an underwater city, and they use these people as slaves for free energy and power, and they're trying to basically, I guess, take over this planet. Like they seem. I don't think they need the whole planet because they have the underwater city, but for some reason they're like, well, we need slave labor, and also we're just also here to take the planet, I guess. They do need a place to exist, but they're not interested in coexisting with the planet's life forms that are already here, it seems like. And they also are using these little things down here. You might notice these. These are called creepers. I believe that it's some sort of plant. I think it's not really super clear about what this is. They grow it in like a dome. Let's see if I can get to that page. Yeah, they grow it in like this tank here. So it seems to just be something that it's like vines that grow kind of rapidly and can. They seem to have at least some semblance of sentience because there are times where they pick up some of the characters. Like in this page, you can see it's picked up John here, which, by the way, I'll explain who these characters are. I guess I should have started with that. But yeah, they have some level of sentience. They're basically used. The Doctor and his companions, they show up and they blast away. They sneak into the underground city by basically hijacking one of these Kleptons, like flying machines, and they fly into the underwater city. It goes underwater, I guess. What do you call it? Pilot. It submerges. How do you pilot it underwater? I don't know. What's a word for that? It's not fly. Swim. I don't know. But they free some slaves. They basically end up destroying the creeper thing, and the creeper essentially wraps itself around the reactor of the underground city. I'm kind of blowing through this story really fast. And it destroys the city. That's essentially what happens. Some other minor things, like obviously the Doctor arrives. They meet the Talls. I want to call them the Talls. They're not the Talls. The Thanes. They befriend the Thanes. Yeah. It's this whole thing. They arrive. They're like, that's the problem. Let's go to the Klepton city. And they end up destroying it, which is interesting. There's no sympathy, I guess, for how the Doctor kind of goes about things. He's perfectly willing to just blow up the Kleptons. So he just blows up their underground city. This is not the end of the Kleptons for good. We'll see them later, actually, in one of the comics we're covering today. But yeah, it's pretty brutal, I think. I don't feel like he tends to make big decisions like this, but he will blow up a planet or two in this, which is pretty wild. But yeah, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. John and Gillian. Who the hell are these kids? Well, let me explain to you. These are the Doctor's grandchildren. Okay? And you might think to yourself, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And you're right, it doesn't make any sense. That's about all the information that we get. It makes no sense, and we just move on and we accept it. There's a lot of issues with this. For some reason, they completely decided to rewrite the Doctor's origins. There's no Susan, there's no Ian, there's no Barbara, despite the fact that this story starts at the beginning of season 2, so Planet of the Giants, where we have never seen a companion actually leave the show at this point. It's never happened, so there's not like, an impetus. There's not like a standard that we have for having new companions, so I guess maybe they were just like, well, there's like, it's not, I don't know, it's not even a thought that they had on how you would introduce new companions. Why would the Doctor be traveling around with new people when we can't really fit that into the timeline right now. So maybe it's just like throw caution to the wind and just completely like rewrite this as kind of an Elseworlds story. I don't know. You can kind of think about it however you want. But the reality of it is it doesn't make sense. That's just the reality of it. By the way, I might say Gillian. I think it's Jillian. John and Jillian, but I hate saying John and Jillian. I feel like John and Gillian sounds better. I think it's Jillian. Because it's like Gillian Anderson. Her name's Jillian, right? It's not Gillian, but it's a G. I'm sorry. John and Jillian. Yeah, I don't know. There's no way to look at this without it just being a contradiction. I believe there are some explanations that maybe this is like sort of a dream that the Doctor dreamed up, some sort of imagined thing that's going on in his mind. But yeah, he calls them his grandchildren. They call him Doctor Who. Again, people might get pissed that they call him Doctor Who, but they consistently do that in this comic. They call him Doctor Who. He calls himself Doctor Who. So you're going to have to get over that. We're exploring these, extended media. They often refer to him as Doctor Who and not the Doctor. Even though consistently in the show, I don't think they've ever called him Doctor Who in this show. I don't think so. I could be wrong. They might have done it like once or twice, ever. But even in the show, it's consistently he's the Doctor, not Doctor Who. But yeah, my question is I don't know why they didn't just use Ian, Barbara, and Susan as the companions. Because I feel like that would have been the solution that makes the most sense. But maybe they were worried about messing with the canonicity of the show, and maybe they just didn't want to be locked in with. I don't know. I'm thinking too hard about it. I don't think they thought too hard about it. I'll be honest. I don't think they thought that hard about it. They didn't even probably recognize that Doctor Who was going to be this big show and that people were going to care at all. So they're just like, here, it's a comic aimed at children. We have 2 children instead of the other people. So the sooner we all just accept that and move on from it, the better off we will be. There's also another contradiction I wanted to note. They call it number 16, and it's like a yard. It's not even a junkyard. It's just a yard, and it's similar to the junkyard that from the show. But if 76 Totters Lane. We went over this when we were talking about season 1. That's the address of the junkyard. So this isn't the same junkyard, and it's just a yard. And I don't know. I don't know if the implication here is that John and Jillian have never met their grandfather. They consistently call him their grandfather. I guess it could be mistaken that they think he's the grandfather, but he doesn't deny it at any point. And they're very consistent throughout this that these are the Doctor's grandchildren. So it's never this could be a misconception. Nope, they all just accept that that's the reality of the situation. But it's weird, yeah. He says, here, how nice to meet you. What, you've never met your grandchildren before? Until, just now? And I think they're around, I would say, 10, 8 to 10, somewhere in there. By the way, I think this is, I know. This is written by a guy named Neville Maine, who wrote the majority of the comics that we're going to be talking about today, except for, the last 3. They switched authors. I decided to do this by year rather than authors because the next guy actually didn't write that many, so it just seemed to make more sense to kind of organize by years. I felt like that was closer to a season anyways. But yeah, so as I said, this was being published from November of 1964 to January of 1965. Which is at the same time that Season 2 was airing. Yeah, so during this comic, actually something significant happened in the show, and that was in between Planet of the Giants and the Dalek Invasion of Earth, Planet of the Giants and the Rescue, it ends during the Rescue. We have the Dalek Invasion of Earth. So the Dalek Invasion of Earth was airing while this was coming out. Which is the final Susan serial. It's the final serial in which Susan appears. So she was written out of the show, which I think is just, I don't know, significant to note that a companion did leave, so that was established while this was being published. And we had a new companion being introduced named Vicky, who we haven't discussed in the book club yet. I quite like Vicky, but we'll get to Vicky. She's introduced in The Rescue. But yeah, I don't know. Just interesting to note. Another thing I did want to mention here was the Doctor Who classic comics. They re-released a bunch of these. So like I said, these were originally released in TV comics. But they did make an effort to re-release some of them in something called Doctor Who Classic Comics, which was just a compilation of various Doctor Who classic comics in no particular order, it seems. They just kind of compiled a bunch of them. A lot of the ones I'm going to be covering today, I'm just covering them literally in published order. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of them, but a few of them never got a re-release ever, so they were only ever published in this TV comic thing. And then there's just no re-release. So, if I wanted to acquire these comics for myself, if you wanted to do that, I would tell you to not do that. It really is not worth it to do that. There's not an easy way to do that. Some of them you would have to get the original TV comic issue, and some of them you could get the Doctor Who classic comic issue, but those were released in like the 90s, the 80s or the 90s. So they're not like even like they're also hard to find probably now. I wouldn't recommend trying like a comic book from that long ago, unless you get it from somebody that cares about preserving those things. Like, it might be in bad condition. It's probably not worth the money either way. Luckily, these comics have pretty much, all of the ones that I found so far have been archived online. Pretty easy to find. So, I would say if you're interested in these, they're all online somewhere. They're pretty easy to find. And I definitely think there's, copyright law in Britain being as it is, I don't think there's a chance that, well, I don't know. Would they re-release these? Probably not, right? Like, in a compilation of, like, Doctor Who classic comic. They should. It's just easy money to just put out, like, a big book of, like, Doctor Who classic comics. And, like, they've been doing that with every comic ever that's ever existed. They do these big books now and put them in comic book stores. It would definitely have an audience. You could definitely sell it, even if you only sell it online or something like that. They should do it, but don't ask me. The thing I especially like about these, like, old school sort of 60s comic books, where I was actually reading not too long ago, I picked up Marvel did do, like, a re-release of their classic, like, Star Wars comics, which is now all non-canon now, but the early Marvel years back in the no, when did Star Wars? Back in the like 70s, they re-released those, and they have such a specific style of the time. I like comic books from that time because they have this specific vibe that's really spacey and weird that I actually quite like. My favorite thing to point out about this in specific, I think it's just the design of the Kleptons. They're really weird looking. Like they're just, it's like an impossible creature to imagine in live action. And we'll see that with a lot of these, that they design these bizarre looking creatures, and I love that. I love that. That's my favorite thing I think about this. Just the way they look is just so weird. Well, that's one of the things is like, back in the day with the television show, they couldn't, do as much. Like with a drawing, it's really easy. You can draw whatever the heck you want. So you can kind of go crazy with it. But, in the show, they're limited by what they can actually make practically, right? So, they can have these really bizarre alien designs. And that's kind of, I think, more so the appeal of, like, comic books, at least at the time, is just how much more could potentially be done, how much larger scale you can make stuff. And, looking at it that way, the story is actually quite epic, I would say. But the reason I say it's simple is because the story is pretty straightforward. you got these bad guys, they're enslaving people, the Doctor beats them with their own machines. There's not really much nuance to the Kleptons. They are just evil for the heck of it. There's no reason for them to be as evil as they are, but they just are. A small note I wanted to point out, this is in the 30th century, if that means anything to you. Doesn't mean much to me, but, you know, it is a time period, and it's worth pointing out that we are placing this somewhere. Another just small little detail I wanted to bring up was just the Thanes here. They mention that they're peaceful, they live in peace, they have no weapons, they don't know how to fight back against the Kleptons. Which again, I think very much parallels the Tals. They also did a similar thing where they were like, no, we don't want to go to war against the Daleks. We won't fight them. There must be a diplomatic way to reason with the Daleks. It's like the same thing, which is again another reason why I want to just say this is kind of like paralleling, like the Kleptons are supposed to be the Daleks, the Thanes are supposed to be the Tals. It's like the same thing. You could replace these two things and it would probably it would be totally fine. The only thing is the Kleptons talk about their planet being too close to the sun and they have to leave, which would become kind of a big canon detail, I guess, if you said like, well, this happened to Skaro and that was the Daleks' planet. But ultimately probably wouldn't matter all that much if we're being honest. Let's, you know, I guess I kind of like zipped over it, but the reason they go traveling is pretty straightforward. John and Gillian, they come on the TARDIS, and John presses a button and they get whisked away into the future. So that's about it. There's not much else to explain about why they're traveling. That's pretty much it. And then they just kind of keep going on adventures. Even though it seems like wildly irresponsible of the Doctor to bring along two children on these very dangerous adventures, especially given that they're his grandchildren, supposedly, which also implies that he must be human in this iteration, right? If his grandchildren are human. Small detail here again, but it's also, I just want to bring attention to the fact that like these people know that they're time travelers, which is something they generally try to keep quiet about. I guess there's a lot of stories in which it's like, I mean, they don't have to say they're time travelers, but they can say they're like travelers from a distant land, I suppose, and kind of just write it off. But there's definitely, their presence often doesn't make sense, so. But they never really explain where they come from. You know? They're like, oh, really? You wouldn't understand if we told you. We come from so far away. I don't think they ever really like tell people that they're time travelers. But in this comic, and quite frequently, they do just like, you know, that is just something everybody seems to just know about them, I guess, that they're time travelers. It's not really anything that's surprising, I guess. Well, it's, you know, they don't really acknowledge it as super surprising. But I do want to talk about John and Gillian here. John and Gillian. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. It sucks. Because I do want to mention them as characters. Who are they? What are they doing? And I feel like, you know, you could just imagine probably your best guess of who these two characters are, who you would assume them to be, is probably true. I don't think they're particularly like solid characters. I don't think they're particularly interesting. And I also think that up until the second author takes over, his name is Bill Mevin. When he takes over, he writes them slightly differently. And I actually do have a problem with Neville Main's the way he writes Gillian, because Gillian is so superfluous. John does a lot of stuff you can see in this panel. He basically sneaks a heat gun into the prison. They get captured, but he has the wherewithal to, before they even get on the submarine, he sneaks a heat gun in his pocket and is able to blow a hole through the wall so they can escape. And not only that, he throws the heat gun to the Doctor so that the Doctor can, well, the Doctor doesn't use it to shoot the Klepton, which is really interesting. But he just like hits him. I think it's just because this is a lot less violent for like a children's book. I would not make the argument that it's because, oh my gosh, it's because the Doctor doesn't use guns, so he wouldn't shoot the Klepton. You know, it's not that. He does use guns in this comic specifically. Let me see if I can find the panel. Yeah, there's this where he shoots the creeper with another heat gun. And there's another part. Well, there's this part here where he's basically encouraging all of them, including John, to shoot the Klepton ships. He's not actively participating. But just believe me, okay? And of course, somebody's probably gonna criticize me and say, "Well, the Doctor actually does use guns. He just doesn't like to. He just doesn't like to kill if he doesn't have to." I know, I get it. I know it's something like that, but he also just doesn't really use guns. Ever, he doesn't like guns. But in this, he does. He'll use the gun. But the point I wanted to make is that John here, you'll see he knocks out a Klepton by just punching him. This is an epic page for John. He's so heroic, but this isn't even all John. John does so much in this. He's basically this action hero, even though he's like 12, you know? But like I said, I don't like the way that Neville Maine writes Jillian because she does nothing. You could go through this whole comic, she does absolutely nothing. She's barely a character. She's just there. Oftentimes she just talks to just acknowledge something that's happening, and it's just completely superfluous dialogue that just doesn't even need to be there. It's like you could have easily just given that dialogue to John to just be like, oh my gosh, this thing is happening. You know, she just doesn't do anything. In later issues, she gets captured. She's used as a damsel in distress a lot. It often comes into question why she's even there, what her purpose is. And that's just consistent with Neville Maine and the way he writes these. That's just his style. I don't think he knows how to write Jillian or what to do with her. I don't know why. I assume he didn't have like full creative liberties. Maybe there was like, oh, you have to put like a boy and a girl in this, and he was just like, well, I don't really know what to do with the girl. It's like I only need one character that is also doing other things, because I don't know why he would put her in otherwise if he had full creative freedom to do so, unless he just needed that plot element of like the damsel in distress to somebody to get captured all the time, which is just kind of lazy, really. But this is the 60s we're talking about, so it's just kind of standard. But I think Bill Mevin does a better job with her, making her sort of this intelligent leader that she just, she's able to figure out things, solve problems. She's much smarter than John is. But I feel like in these early issues, like John is kind of, he's not stupid. But yeah, I think in the Bill Mevin comics, he's a little more like kind of meat-headed, but yeah. So I guess that kind of covers the Klepton parasites for the most part. I guess the reason it's called the Klepton parasites, the parasites actually refer to the creepers, I believe, the just vines that cover everything. That's why it's called the Klepton parasites. It's a decent enough story. It's very like standard, though, I think. Very like kind of Saturday morning cartoon in a way. So without further ado, we should probably move on from this one. This is the longest one. A lot happens in this one. The Thorovian Quest is the second story that we're going to be covering. This one's slightly shorter. This one's only 12 issues, which is actually significantly shorter than like the other one was 20 issues. 12 issues is a pretty short comic. But also, I feel like kind of a lot happens in this one. It seems that the TARDIS just kind of it arrives, and then they get into like an emergency. They get hit by an asteroid, and then they land on this like small planetoid. And they meet a guy named Grigg. They meet this cute little alien boy. Is a man. That's just what his race looks like. Again, this is my favorite thing about these comics. It's just the weird alien designs. They can kind of do whatever the heck they want with these, and they're very fun. This is a very fun design for a creature that to try to imagine this in live action it would not look very good at all. But it's, here it looks great. I like it. It looks real weird. The first part of this is actually kind of semi-insignificant. They land on this planetoid, and they get attacked by a big space lizard, and they meet Grig, who's actually not a bad guy. He needs help because he's stranded on the planet too. His rocket ship crashed, and he actually needs help. So they help him by getting back to his rocket ship, escaping the lizard, and flying back to his home planet. Basically, he left his home planet because there's like a mass disease on his home planet that's killing everybody. And so he was sent out to find a cure, and his ship crashed on this planetoid. And then they go back to the planet. Actually, yeah, I needed to clarify this. So he brings them back to the planet, the doctor and his companions, because the doctor's like, oh, I could probably help you to figure out this disease. I've seen many diseases. I could probably solve it. He goes back, he examines them. He's not able to figure out what the disease is. And then they send him off to some other guy in the city. And this other guy is like, oh, you have to go to this other planet to get this... what's it called? It's basically a rare moss, apparently. They're like, that'll cure the illness. And so they go to another planet. Like I said, this is kind of epic, honestly. By the way, keep in mind, they left the TARDIS behind on that original, like, planetoid that they started on. So they're going on an adventure, okay? They went to this other planet called, I believe it's called Theros. The Therovians. By the way, Therovian Quest is the name of this. The Therovians are from the planet Theros, okay? Then they go to Ixon, which is this planet that they're at right now. It's like an ice planet, and there's a rare moss that exists. And they talk to this guy. Well, they get captured, actually, because they land on the planet, and they're like, you're here to hurt us or something. You're spies, right? He says that. And they're like, no, we're not spies. We're here to find a moss. And he's like, well, okay. I'll allow you to go search for the moss. And he just, like, believes their story. Except he doesn't, because he's evil. And it's like, he's basically like, if they go get the moss and bring it back here, we can lord it over the Therovians and charge them $1 billion for a cure to their thing to buy the moss. So they plan on basically capturing them again and stealing the moss. Long story short, they find the moss, and Grig fights off this, like, woolly mammoth-looking creature. And then they get captured, but not really, because the doctor has a match, and he uses a match. It's very funny. He uses a match to set their curtains on fire, and there's no time. It goes out of control so quickly, and they just escape in the chaos. Which I have trouble imagining this exact scenario where you take a match out of your pocket and you somehow can light up these curtains that quickly and nobody has any time to stop you from doing that. It's kind of hard to imagine, but it's very funny, and I will accept that. And then they go back to the home planet, and that's about it. They heal everybody on the planet, on Theros, and everybody's happy and everybody's satisfied, and that's wonderful, isn't it? And also... they've gone off into time and space again. See, so they just know that the TARDIS is a time machine and that they're time travelers and all that. And they don't even try to hide it. Nobody tries to hide it. Everybody just is like, oh, well, that's a normal thing to be and to have and to a normal life for you to have, I guess. I don't know. Therovian Quest, also not bad. I think, it helps that it's so epic. It has 12 issues to sort of lay out this whole story. I actually like it. I would say where the Klepton Parasites is kind of a standard story, this one kind of goes places. This one's kind of fun. This one feels like pretty epic. I had a good time with this one. So this one was in TV Comics 684 to 689. I've wrote all this information down, just by the way, just to throw it out there. Again, written by Neville Maine. Again, Jillian does nothing in this story. I don't know that John does much either, this story, technically speaking, though. But, it's just the standard. So this aired from published between January 16th, 1965 and February 22nd, 1965. And it's being published during the Romans. Like I said, one of the big... Well, I didn't say this, but the Romans is sort of the first... After Vicky's introduced, it's sort of the big Vicky serial where she's on a new adventure as opposed to like her starting adventure. And then it airs through to the Web Planet, which the Web Planet is interesting because we actually have a comic that is a direct sequel to the Web Planet. Which, by the way, I should mention that it would have made more sense for me probably to have covered season 2 of Doctor Who first instead of this, but I wanted to break up the season 1 episode, and instead of doing immediately going into season 2, I wanted to do this because I planned on just doing this initially, and I was putting it off already, and would just probably be annoying to just do season 2 and then come back to this. So I wanted to, we're kind of out of order here, but that's purely because I didn't start with any intention to include episodes about the show at all. This is literally being published alongside season 2, like literally at the same time. Like the first episode of season 2, or sorry, the first serial of season 2. This came out like in tandem, so it goes hand in hand. It makes sense to have covered season 2 first, but we didn't. So, and this would have been republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 12. So, like I said, the first one was in issue 2 of Doctor Who Classic Comics. The Throvian Quest is in issue 12. So, try to make sense of this. I certainly can't. But yeah, moving on. So, the next story is The Hijackers of Thrax. This one's just kind of whatever to me. I'm not crazy about it. I think it's also kind of a standard story. Essentially, what happens is... you have it's the year 2075. Imagine, the year 2075. The people of Earth have a colony on Venus, which this might kind of tie into the Dalek book, if you remember us covering that, where it took place centrally on the Earth colony on Venus. So, we could draw connections there. We can draw connections there at some point. It seems like 2075, that's not too far off, guys. That's not too far off. That's like 50 years from now. 50 years from now, we're going to have a colony on Venus. Just you wait, okay? But basically, the Earth is trying to send supplies to their colony on Venus, and the ships keep disappearing. Well, it turns out that there's this spaceship that's like hiding in a cloud, as you can see here, or a space station sort of thing. And it's ran by this guy named Thrax, who's kind of like a pirate. What he's basically doing is he captures these spaceships and captures the supplies and then tries to upcharge to resell supplies to the people of Venus at like an expensive rate. So they're being sold their own supplies, but for a higher cost. And so the Doctor just kind of stops it. Basically, initially they are in prison. They use soap and knock the guards over and escape. They also escape with all the other people. And then later on, they find those sacks of potatoes, and then they start throwing the potatoes at the guards. And then they use the potatoes to also break this machine that's creating the mist so that the Earth colony can now see the space station and basically stop them. And here's another panel in which the Doctor points a gun at Thrax. That's basically it. That's what happens. It's kind of it's a really simple, straightforward story. I'm not crazy about it or anything. I think it's just kind of whatever. There were a couple things I did want to talk about. I don't know if the mist thing really makes that much sense. Like if there's a big cloud in space, it seems like the ships must be just disappearing, right? But there's this big cloud in space that's the reason the space station's hidden, and they must be going into or close to the cloud before they disappear, but nobody's able to put that together, so I guess the cloud is not visible. I don't know. I don't know if that part even makes any sense at all, honestly, but the other thing I thought was funny is they charge the people of Venus 10,000 Earth pounds, which I think is absolutely hilarious, as if all of humanity has consolidated the currency of Earth to be the British pound. Obviously, they just did it because Doctor Who's British, and this is a British, adaptation made by British people, and of course they're going to use their own currency. If this was an American comic, we would be saying, it's 10,000 Earth dollars, right? And, if you're from some other country, you'd probably find that silly as well. Why do we think the American dollar is going to be the standard currency in the future at some point? I mean, Australians have dollars too, but I don't know. Is that less believable? If I say that to you, would you think that there's no way the American dollar would become the standard currency? I feel like that's almost not unbelievable, actually. I don't know. I'm almost like we already consider ourselves like a superpower, don't we? Like the most important country on the planet. So not that I'm saying that's okay, but Oh, there's a point in here where they could just escape, they could just leave, and they don't. They stay on board to stop Thrax, which I just think is good for the characters to be like, okay, yes, there is like a narrative here. There's like an evil to be defeated. It's not just like, let's leave because we have the opportunity to leave. It's like, no, we got to do the right thing first. Which, again, I would say in like season 1 of Doctor Who was maybe not necessarily like a motivation to do good. Oftentimes they kind of had to have some excuse to stick around instead of just leaving. Here we are in these are the comic books, and they are establishing, just this this virtue and this sense of justice to do the right thing, to actually help out. You'll notice from this little panel that the next thing we're going to cover is the on the web planet. We're going to the web planet. And by the way, these names that I'm using for these stories, some of them actually have different names. These are just kind of the official names that I found on the Doctor Who wiki. This is just the typical names that they use for these, but they do have other names. It's not like, it just depends on who you're asking what these stories are called. But but just to wrap up Hijackers of Thrax, this was aired on, published, god dang it. I just want to use the right word at least once. These were published in TV Comics 690 through 692, so this is only 3 issues. Which means 6 pages of comics. That's why it feels so insignificant compared to the others, maybe. It's definitely not as big an adventure, but that length gets to be eventually kind of somewhat standard. Actually, 3 issues is probably the shortest one that we're going to be covering today. This is, I think, just the shortest story altogether. Yeah, is what it is. Also written by Neville Maine again. You'll notice, I wanted to talk about this. It's not just that it's written by Neville Maine, it's that he does everything. So he does the writing, he does the art, he does the lettering, he does the bubbles. He does everything, which I think is pretty impressive given the fact that these are publishing in the mid 60s. And like at this point, Marvel and DC were both in their like Silver Age, and they were publishing like Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, X-Men. Obviously, DC was doing Superman, Batman. They've been doing those for a while, but like in more of a modern sense, right? The Flash, the new Flash, the Barry Allen Flash, and they were very much standardizing how comics were being done, and also very much popularizing comics. This is when comics were becoming super popular. Which I guess is part of the reason that there are a lot of comic books based on various properties from this era, is because this is when they were like super popular. Like kids loved these things. The Silver Age was kicked off, I think, in like 63 or maybe a little earlier, maybe just 1960, even earlier than that, because I think they kick it off with like the original Flash, is I think when they were like, this is basically when the Silver Age starts. For Marvel, it was Fantastic Four #1. Which I think was a little 63, maybe a little earlier, I don't know. But like this was in the midst of it, and they had larger teams writing stuff. So they had Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, right? They kind of both worked on the early issues, but they got more and more people to write stories and do lettering and do coloring and do all of that. So they had like smaller teams so that I think they could pump out issues a lot faster. So I think if you have just one person that's writing these comics, I mean, there's definitely not going to be as much variation between the issues. They're all going to feel like a singular person wrote them. But I mean, like, I don't know. It's kind of impressive. Like, the art isn't is good. I would say it's good. I wouldn't even say, I was going to say it's not bad, but like, I would say it's good. It's well done. And for him to do everything is just like, I don't know. That's a big task. That's pretty impressive. So, you know, if there's some criticisms that I have about it, like maybe the stories are a little simplistic, maybe he doesn't write Jillian super well, those criticisms, like, you know, they're flying in the face of the fact that he did this entirely by himself, and like that by itself is impressive. So I'm not trying to, like, you know, say that he did a bad job or anything, because he absolutely did a fantastic job with these. These are really well done. But yeah, just to finish this off, so this published during March 1st, 1965 to March 15th, 1965. So yeah, 3 weeks. And it was actually airing or being published during the Web Planet's airing. So that's why next week they're like, oh, we got to do a Web Planet issue, right? Because that serial had just finished. So, yeah, I don't know. They immediately were like, finally, we get to adapt it. Like, we weren't able to use the Daleks at all. We've done 3 stories so far, no Daleks. We can't use them. And we haven't really gotten enough from the show to use. They probably, no, I was going to say they could use the Vord, but the Vord are also, like, those rights are tied in with the Daleks as well, because they're both Terry Nation, aren't they? I don't know. I don't think they were doing solo, like, Vord comics. I'm actually certain that they weren't. So they probably could have used the Vord, but they just didn't. I don't know. They invented the Kleptons and the Thorovians, I guess, so far. 2 aliens. But yeah, we get to use the Zarbi, which this is my only regret in covering it this way and not doing season 2 first, is that we're not going to actually talk about the Web Planet story first. Long story short, the Web Planet is this story where the Zarbi are like these giant ants, and you have the Zarbi and the Menoptera, and the Menoptera are like these bee people, and these bee people are being attacked by the Zarbi, and the Doctor shows up and defeats the Zarbi and saves the Menoptera. Blah, 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 blah. This is long story short, that's what happens. But anyways, Hijackers of Thrax, last thing about it, it was re-released in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 13, which actually does follow directly after the one in which the Thorovian Quest was re-released, but yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Moving on the Web Planet. We return to the planet Vortis, which is, I mean, the planet Vortis is like canon because this is the TV show, right? They go to the planet Vortis in the episode in the serial The Web Planet. So this is the first one where we're like, you know, we're doing something that is tying into existing canon very specifically. It's not just a made up planet that doesn't matter. You know, I don't know. There's something significant about that. Anyways, let me cover all the boring stuff first, I guess. So this is TV comic issues 693 through 698, which is 6 issues, which means we're covering 12 pages here. Quite a bit longer than the previous story, but exactly as long as the Thorovian Quest. It's also written by Neville Maine. I mean, you could usually tell, like, I'm showing you, we have a visual up on screen. Neville Maine, his comics look like this. If you see this art style, that's Neville Maine, okay? March 22nd, 1965 to April 26th of 1965. It starts after the Web Planet and ends during the Space Museum, which is interesting because that means the Crusade was in between there, and so it's also being published as the Crusade was being aired. But this is kind of a big deal because this is very fresh, like only a couple days after the Web Planet serial concluded. We're immediately given a story set on that same planet, a direct sequel to it. And the direct sequel, not too shabby, of course. The first thing I want to talk about here is this little speech bubble here. This is the planet called Vortis. I've been here before when I helped defeat the Zarbi. And this is interesting, and you could probably, think for yourself as to why this is kind of interesting, because he's basically acknowledging their past adventure, right? Their The Web Planet serial that everybody had just watched on television. And he's like, oh, I was here before when I defeated the Zarbi. And so the implication of this is that that is a past adventure that he had before he... assumedly before he started going on adventures with John and Jillian, which somehow implies that the TV canon is also in the comic book canon somehow, even though, like I said, John and Jillian, they refer to the Doctor as their grandfather, and there's just no explanation of that whatsoever. How can that be true? How can the TV canon exist in this universe? But... let's just accept it, I guess, and just move on with our lives. The most significant thing here is the Zarbi. These ant Zarbis are, they can fly. They can fly now. They can fly now. So the Doctor meets the Menoptera again. He talks with them like, oh, we will remember you. Actually, let's talk about this panel. So after their brain was killed, the Zarbi worked under our control. They basically were able to use the Zarbi as kind of like, they were able to use them to run their farms. So this is referring to the events of the Web Planet. But then apparently they started to fly. They started to kill Menoptera. Well, by the way, they discover like a strange spacecraft that had crashed here. Menoptera lead them to this weird like mushroom-looking fortress. Where the rest of the Menoptera have been captured by the Zarbi. Oh, but then there's a big detail revealed here. They find a rock, and it turns out to be Glavinium X, the rarest mineral in the universe. And apparently with this, anybody could build, like, bombs, horrible bombs. And they're like, well, that strange spacecraft, those people maybe, use that to create these bombs, and they... are probably here because they want more of this. I mean, they're rude. So it's actually kind of a lengthy battle between the Doctor, the Menoptera. They have these electron guns, and they're shooting back, and they're fighting these the Zarbi. So there's actually a significant battle that takes place before they get into the fortress. Oh, but I guess first the Doctor gets kidnapped. And, he just gets taken into the fortress. And then they discover that the Zarbis that are actually flying around are not actually Zarbis. They're fakes. And they're flown by these weird-looking creatures. Who I don't think are ever named. Oh, the Skirkons. The Skirkons? Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention in this battle. The Doctor does shoot one of the Zarbis. Just want to throw that out there. So they fly one of the Zarbis into the fortress. John and Jillian get into the fortress. They untie the Doctor, who basically sabotages their little thing that they're using to control the Zarbi. Which, by the way, there's like two types of Zarbi here. It seems like they do have control over the flying Zarbi, which I guess the Zarbi can fly now. But it's also seemingly that there are fake Zarbi that they are piloting. I guess so. I don't know. It's kind of unclear. But, like, they have to have also captured the Zarbi as well. As we know, they were, like, working on the farms and stuff, and they started going crazy and attacking and flying away. And that just happened all of a sudden, right? So, the Zarbi can fly. It's not just these machines that they've created to look like the Zarbi. And I think there's only 2 or 3 of these Scarecons. I think. I'm not sure. Hard to say. There's the one that they discover in the machine in the first place. And then there's these 2, which you could argue this is a different one, but I think this is definitely one of those 2. But I don't know. I think there's like 3 of them that we see. And this is like kind of crazy, but they escape in the flying Zarbi, but they threaten that they're going to turn all the Zarbi against them. So the Doctor turns around in his Zarbi and blows up the fortress, basically removing any control that they have over the Zarbi and just completely destroying them. And they're annihilated, absolutely wild. I think these are fun to mention because the show very much treats the Doctor as like the master diplomat, where he'll go out of his way to like not cause a lot of violence, but in when you revisit something like this, it's kind of jarring, when there's like this really destructive thing, like he just killed these people, like just these random like aliens. Like, yeah, they were evil and they probably deserved it, but well, do they deserve death? Probably not, but they're bad. We don't really care about them personally. I don't care about them personally. But yeah, that's the end of On the Web Planet. It's the end of the On the Web Planet adventure. And so that's that. And honestly, not a bad follow-up to the Web Planet serial. It's fun. It takes the Zarbi, it evolves them into like something a little bit different, a little bit new. It introduces a new villain who are they're scary. I like their design. Like I said, I think that's my favorite thing about these is like just the weird alien designs. And that's definitely one of those weird alien designs that old Neville has dreamed up. All in all, not a bad follow-up at all. Kind of interesting, kind of fun. This is not the last time we will be revisiting the Zarbi, for sure. There's definitely other stories that involve the Zarbi. So we'll be talking about them later. Obviously, we'll be talking about them when we cover Season 2 as well. But, it's fun that we now have this like piece of the puzzle that we can maybe like, piece into something else. Like, oh, here's another adventure with a Zarbi. If we have another adventure with a Zarbi, we can talk about this adventure and be like, how does this tie into this other thing? Like that's fun. Right? That's fun. All right. The Gyros Injustice. How do I feel about this one? This one's fine. I mean, it's okay. This is aired in TV Comics 699 to 704. So again, this is another 12-issue comic. Again, Neville Maine. This was ran from May 3rd, 1965 to June 7th, 1965. So we're halfway through the year, all right? We're getting there. This one was published during the Space Museum and also published during the Chase, which is significant because the Chase, not to spoil... I mean, I don't care. Not to spoil. I am going to spoil. Okay, we're going to talk about Season 2 of Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, right? In the Chase, we have a very significant companion change, and I think it's just worth pointing these things out when they happen. Very significant change to the cast, even though it doesn't affect these comics really at all. I just think it's fun to note. So during the time this was being published, Ian and Barbara went on their final adventure, which is The Chase, which is The Chase. That is the final Ian Chesterton, Barbara Wright adventure in the show. And they were replaced with a new companion, Stephen Taylor. So significant to just note that the status quo has changed. All of the original companions have left the TARDIS at this point, and you have now the First Doctor, Vicky, and Steven. If we want to even try to place this somewhere in the timeline, like there's places to do it, except for the simple fact that the Doctor usually shifts companions, but the First Doctor never travels alone. It's definitely something to talk about. You may think like maybe there's a time where he doesn't travel, he travels by himself or he's in between companions, but no, it's because he kind of shifts companions like that, where like it's in the middle of a serial, he gets a new companion, and there's never really like a period of time where he's not traveling with some companion or another. But yeah, at this point, at the point in which this is being published, we did change and finally shed our OG companions entirely, to the point where John and Gillian maybe kind of makes sense as like, oh, is this new companion pair? Maybe we can fit them in at some point. but realistically, it doesn't really happen. Probably just interesting to mention. And this was republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 17, which is the latest one so far in the Doctor Who Classic Comics line. So what is this about? Well, pretty early on, Gillian is kidnapped by this weird ball. What is this weird ball? And it takes her, and Gillian is basically gone from this story for most of it. Not that she, like I said, not that she does anything to begin with, but she's completely out of the story. This is the one where she is very much used as like the central plot element, this damsel in distress. They got to go save Gillian. Oh, also, I guess the first page is kind of interesting. Is it? They're talking about like, well, we're nearing our journey's end. I wonder if we'll land on Earth. I guess they're trying to return to Earth. The thing to mention about like the original season, and I hope I mentioned this when I was covering the show, but they can't just go back to Earth. The Doctor initially kidnaps Ian and Barbara, but then he has trouble piloting the ship back to Earth. Even though they want to go back to Earth, he has trouble getting them there. He doesn't seem to be able to control the TARDIS very well. And it's not until... Actually, I think it's just kind of a coincidence that they end up pretty close to where they left on Earth during the chase. And that's why... Well, I mean, we'll rewatch it, and so I'll be able to know for sure if that's the case. It might have just been coincidence that he landed on Earth close enough to their time that they could disembark. But it's interesting just to note that they're kind of using that as the same plot element here, that the Doctor really can't control the TARDIS, that he's trying to return them back to Earth, but he can't, because he has no control over it, and he's like, well, maybe this is Earth, I don't know. And they leave, and it's not Earth. It's, well, interestingly enough, I believe the planet is called Gyros. Oh, yeah, okay, here's where the confusion lies, okay? So these round things, they're called the gyros, and they're just machines that were created by the people of Gyros, or the people. They created these gyros machines, and so here it's referred to the planet of the gyros, and then the gyros captured Gillian, the fertile lands of the gyros. Enter the forbidden fertile lands of the gyros. The gyros. This is really confusing. Okay, listen. So the gyros, let's talk about the machines, okay? Because the gyros machines were created by the people in their big city, and they're just these machines that, like, do farming and a bunch of stuff for them. Well, at least I believe that's what they were created for. I looked over this, and I'm like, I don't think it's very specific about why. I think they do explain that this planet basically... It has like a hot zone and a cold zone, which take up like one side of the planet is way too close to the sun, and the other side of the planet is way too far away from the actually that whatever. But the other side of the planet is too cold. They're both like extreme temperatures, and you can't live on either side. So there's only like this narrow band around the planet that they can live in, and apparently the gyros kind of like. They inhabit this narrow band. They were created by the people, but they have started to defend the cities, and so they capture people and imprison people that try to get into the city. Apparently, this is what's happened. I don't know if this story actually makes that much sense, honestly. But essentially, the reason they bring them into the city is that they take them to these survivors, these people here, which, by the way, the people created the gyros, but they left the cities, supposedly, because they were all getting sick. Everybody started to get this horrible illness, and so people started mass migrating from the city, and that's when they started living out in the wilderness, and the gyros started to treat them as, like, others, I guess, and protected the people that stayed in the city, so that's these people here. These people live in the city, and the gyros keep them safe, actually. And it feeds them. They do all this stuff. They basically take care of these people. I guess the sickness just kind of... Well, it didn't I don't know. It seems that it's not, like, I don't know. It's not affecting the people in the city, but maybe it is. Maybe people do still get sick, but the people on the outside are sick, but they're not suffering the effects of the sickness anymore. So they get sick, they carry the illness, but they can't, they exhibit no symptoms whatsoever. So it's, I guess these people could be infected, so they would keep them out, but the doctor here is like, well, I have like a simple injection. I have a vaccine, I guess, that will, protect you guys from the sickness, and so the sickness is no longer a problem. Yeah, okay. So anyways, that's that. But the funny thing is this panel, it says the planet Gyros is ruled by robot machines. So this is the panel in which it confuses the whole thing. They don't name the planet, except here where they call it the planet Gyros, but that doesn't really make sense. It seems to maybe be like a typo, that it's the planet of the Gyros. Because why would the planet be named after these machines? Like, there would have to be a point where the planet existed, the people existed on the planet, they invented the Gyros. Would they just name it after the planet? I don't think the planet is actually called Gyros, but because this panel exists, there's some confusion there, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I've literally covered all of this story, basically, already. Essentially, they have to go save Jillian. The Gyros are apparently taking her to, like, a volcano, and they're gonna throw her into a volcano, which is insane. I don't know why that... I have two issues with this. A, why are they throwing Jillian in a volcano? B, like, they didn't throw the Doctor and John in a volcano. They took them to, as prisoner, basically, and introduced them to the people living there. Why didn't they take Jillian there? That doesn't make any sense, right? But the other thing is sort of the timing here is if they took her directly to this volcano, it's like, I don't think they would have made the trip in time, but, whatever. Does it matter that much? And they basically have to time this thing where, like, Jillian's, like, falling, and so they use this hover boat thing that they've got from the people living in the city to save her. They just, like, shoot it out, and Jillian bounces off and lands on the other side of the volcano. And, she escapes, and that's awesome. And yeah, I guess all problems are solved. There's no more problems. Next one, Challenge of the Piper. This is one of my favorites of the ones that I read. This one's actually quite interesting. I think specifically because of the lore implications of it. It's really, really out there. It's really bizarre. Again, let me cover the boring stuff first. This published TV Comic 705 to 709, which is 5 issues, which means this is a 10-page comic. Neville Maine, yet again, writer of this. 14th of June, 1965 to the 12th of July, 1965. So this was airing during The Chase, again, which is the serial in which Stephen Taylor was introduced as a new companion. Ian and Barbara left. And then it went on to end while the Time Meddler was airing, which I believe is significant in that it is the end of Season 2. I think it's the last Season 2 episode. Let me double check that. Yeah, 100% correct. I'm so smart. How did I know that? I just knew it. I just knew that. That information was just in my brain. But this is a pretty fun story. Mostly because this is dealing with the myth of the Pied Piper. Who, if you know the story of the Pied Piper, basically this is basically explaining the story of the Pied Piper. This is the first page, is that he goes to this Hamelin town, and he plays his pipe, and leads these rats into a river, and they all drown. He saves the people of Hamelin and gets rid of all the rats, the rat problem. But he was supposed to get paid. He was supposed to get paid 1,000 guilders. And they were like, no, we'll give you 50. And then he gets pissed off, and he's like, huh. And then he plays a little tune on his flute and leads all of the kids out of Hamelin Town, basically kidnaps all the children and sends them to this like magical wonderland. So that's, if you don't know the story of the Pied Piper, that's the story of the Pied Piper. Okay, it's a common British children's story. I don't know. People in America probably less likely to know it, honestly. I don't know. It's definitely, I think it's like one of the Grimm fairy tales, right? The Brothers Grimm. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. It is one of the Brothers Grimm stories, but it is like it's a folklore tale, right? From Germany. Anyways, this is a really significant story because this character is essentially he's mythical, right? He's kind of mystical. He's a magician. He's a weird guy. He's got a magic flute. And he takes the children to like a wonderland, like an other world, right? Some sort of magical land which they can't actually find their way out of. This is interesting because the Doctor's TARDIS just lands in the middle of this magical wonderland, and he meets the children. And this is funny. We are all children from Hamlin Town. We are trying to find our way home. These must be the children who followed that Pied Piper. Like he's bringing up a silly like folk tale and just being like, oh, this is a real thing that happened. These are the children of Hamlin Town from the Pied Piper story. Oh my god. It just seems kind of ridiculous that he's just like, oh, that's a real thing. It's a very mystical story. It's very magical. There's a lot of magic. There's this black castle this is where the Pied Piper lives. And it's surrounded by magic, apparently. So the Doctor prepares a bunch of things to go confront the Pied Piper. And you might think maybe he's being dismissive here in these two panels of the existence of magic. So, I believe in magic, I believe in science. In reality, no. He seems to be acknowledging that there is magic, but he's going to defeat it whether or not it is magic or not. And I can say that for a fact because there's definitively magical things that happen in this story, which is not something that Doctor Who typically does, okay? Rare. Magic, almost never. Everything generally has a scientific explanation. The only thing I would point to, there's a, like, kind of a big one, which, you know, recently has been, well, okay, maybe two, because I feel like the recent seasons of Doctor Who, if you've been following Doctor Who, they've acknowledged two characters. One is the Celestial Toymaker, and the other is Sutekh, right? From the Pyramids of Mars. Which are both kind of mythical, magical, somewhat godlike characters that exist in the Doctor Who universe. I will tell you, at this point in the show, there has never been a magical character. It's never, not at this point that we're airing, which is why I'm bringing up the episodes, because this is airing during season 2. Okay, Celestial Toymaker is in season 3, so that's next season, where they'll have a character that is somewhat similar. So this is a very original idea. But yeah, here's the point. They go through these magical woods, and there's a dragon. And the Doctor uses a fire extinguisher to fight off the dragon. And you may be thinking, well, it can't be a real dragon. There's no other explanation given. It just seems that this is a real-ass dragon that just shows up. So... like, it's not revealed that everything was a machine and that the Wonderland is, like, some sort of, illusion created by the Piper, who's actually a scientist. No. There's just a real-ass dragon that the Doctor isn't even, like, that surprised by, and he fights it off. It's wild. I don't know. This is crazy. This is so cool. Right? Essentially, they go through, like, a mythical, like, bog, or like a foggy, it's foggy, and they have to, like, make their way through. And Doctor creates, like, this, like, echo sounder thing. It's one of the things he brought a bag full of a bunch of random shit that he was basically predicting what he might need. He brings this thing, an echo sounder, and he uses it to predict how deep the water is so that they don't, like, fall into the bog. This is really stupid to me, though, because, like, why can't you just take a step? Take a step, See if you could still feel the the bottom, and just keep going that way. Like, do you really need a device to ping the bottom when you're standing on the bottom? I don't get it. I don't understand that. But sure. Here they confront the Pied Piper, and here he is. They're in his castle. I liked this interaction because I thought this was really like dumb. But he's like, "Who are you? I am who, and I've come here to ask." It's just a really dumb line. It's just so stupid. I don't know. I've got nothing else to say about it. It's just funny. Of course, they would never do this in the show because they would never acknowledge his name. His last name is Who, because it's not. But it's funny in the comic is when they say shit like this. Who are you? I am who. All right. So the reason I'm saying some magic is real here. Not only is the Wonderland real, not only did they face a dragon in the woods, but there's this point in which the Pied Piper is like, he's basically, here, I have three tests, and then I'll release the children if you can pass my 3 tests. The first test, he turns invisible. He turns invisible, no explanation, and they just kind of use, I believe, they call it a radar. I believe it's also just the echo sounder they were using before. The next test is that the Pied Piper jumps out the window, and they're like, "Oh, jump out the window, and survive the fall." Basically, is like his thing. So he jumps out the window, and he seems to kind of use his cape maybe to, I don't know, somehow glide downwards. Whereas the Doctor jumps, he brought a parachute with him, so it's kind of the same thing. I don't know if this is magic, if you could call this magic. If he's using his cape as kind of a way to sort of slow his fall, it's kind of like, it's out as if he's using it that way, but you could make the argument he's not, and he's actually just gliding to the bottom, but I don't know. So again, the Doctor just brought the very correct thing that he needed. He needed a parachute, somehow predicted that he would need a parachute, I guess. And then the last test is pretty straightforward. The Pied Piper is like, "Here, I have this flute. I'm going to play a tune. You have to match every note exactly." And the Doctor pulls out a flute and starts playing the same melody, and he matches it exactly. But it turns out that the Doctor actually used a tape recorder. He, when he was rummaging in his backpack, he predicted that this would be the last well, no, it's while he's saying it's the last task, I guess. He pulls out his recorder. But no, he doesn't even say it until after he plays the song. He plays the song, and then he's like, "Ha, you have to now copy the song I just played." So he, had to predict that was going to be the thing he needed to do. So he'd have to know that, and then he'd turn on the tape recorder in advance. And then he's literally playing the tape recorder instead of the flute. But he matches it exactly, and then he takes the children home from Hamelin Town. I think it's fun here to maybe mention, it's not super significant, but the second Doctor especially was known for playing the I believe a recorder, it was a recorder, right? And I feel like this is kind of just maybe worth mentioning, maybe a weird parallel that the Doctor plays a little flute sort of recorder in Challenge of the Piper. It's the first instance of the Doctor playing a flute, so probably not. Doesn't really mean anything. I don't know. Whatever. And that's about it. So they return the children to Hamelin Town, and the Hamelin Town people are like, "Well, yes, we learned our lesson. We'll give him the money that he, the Doctor's like, you should have given him the money." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll give him the money now. He did. I guess he did earn that money, and we should have given it to him in the first place." They go to this cave, and they leave the money there, but the Wonderland is gone, and the Pied Piper is not there anymore, so how mysterious, how strange. And the TARDIS is just kind of sitting in that cave, it looks like, so whereas before, we remember when it landed, it was in this Wonderland, so just another instance of magic. And the Doctor also acknowledges, you never know what these magical fellows plan to do next, implying that there's other magical fellows. Yeah, it's a pretty big implication, right? But yeah. Anyways, that's Challenge of the Piper. That one's weird. Just because it's got a magical man in it. I don't know. I find that really significant. The fact that they fight a dragon. There's magic in this one. That's weird. That's just weird. First instance of it, but there you go. Then we have this one slightly in color, but this is also a Neville Maine original. This one's called Prisoners of Grytog or Gritog, Gritog. And this one came out as part of a holiday special, a TV Comics holiday special in 1965, which, weirdly enough, according to my information, it was aired in July. So I guess by holiday special they mean like summer, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't mean usually you would think of Christmas as like a holiday, but I don't know. It was published in July, so it was actually technically published while Challenge of the Piper was being published, but also, at the same time, in the middle of it. So it's got the same time periods during the chase specifically. Yeah, during the chase. No, sorry, it's after. It's literally in between the chase and the Time Meddler. It's not technically published during either. It was technically published after the chase, before the Time Meddler. Okay. So it's just, I don't know, interesting to acknowledge that fact. This is kind of a one-off. It was the only comic there. I believe it's 4 pages. And there was no other Doctor Who comic included there, so this is a pretty straightforward story. I don't think it's too terribly impressive. This story, though, it's significant to note that this was never republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics. It's one of the few that is just, you have to find an archive online or somehow get that original TV Comics issue, I guess. So that's just kind of an annoying thing, but it was written by Neville Maine. It really should be included in any collection that's trying to include the classic TV comics, because it is one of them. It's just that it was in a holiday special issue instead of one of the regular issues. So this story is, it takes place on the planet Spectra. Apparently, these spaceships fly too close to this planet. And the people of Spectra are kind of shitty, and they just like capture them and imprison these people that flew too close to the planet. The Doctor arrives and basically help them out. He uses a flute to basically attract this like brontosaurus looking monster, so that it will smash the fence and freeze the people, and then the people ride the dinosaur, and they aid the people to escape. It turns out, the people of Gritog start firing on the TARDIS. They start shooting at the TARDIS as the Doctor and John and Gillian are trying to leave. But the Doctor says, well, hey, it didn't do anything, because he turns on a powerful magnetic beam that repels the missiles. And then it also says there isn't a dictator in the universe who can wreck the TARDIS. Which, honestly, I think the TARDIS is pretty much impervious to being attacked anyways. I think. I might not be correct about that. Maybe you can destroy the TARDIS if you really, shoot something at it. I always thought it was kind of just completely impenetrable. It's just like this, you could shoot a fucking nuke at it and it would survive that. I don't know. Could be wrong, but I don't know. He says he put on a magnet to repel the beam, but that's the story. I mean, this one's really forgettable. It's really kind of a, been there, done that sort of oh, we arrive on a planet, we save some people, we leave, and nothing really happens. So that's about it. Prisoners of Grytog, kind of whatever. But yeah, definitely we have to talk about it, because there it is. Next one. This one is called The Moon Landing. This was aired or published in TV Comics 710 to 712, also written by Neville Maine, again. This published, I keep using the wrong words, I'm so sorry. July 19th to 1965 to August 2nd, 1965. And it was republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 22. And it was published during the Time Meddler and after. So before Season 3, which starts with Galaxy 4. I know maybe that sounded confusing. The first serial of Season 3 is called Galaxy 4. Yeah, so it was the first story that kind of continues over into that small period of time between Season 2 and Season 3's airing. If you find that at all interesting. But this story is actually pretty interesting for one main reason, which is that the moon landing hadn't happened yet. So this is actually predicting the moon landing. It's pretty close. This is supposed to be kind of present day, but it's a prediction of the moon landing, which is really bizarre. I don't know why they kind of went there, but the moon landing happened in 1969, and this comic was published in 65. So 4 years after this comic came out is when we would actually land on the moon. So I don't know what to make of that exactly. It's kind of interesting just to have like a comic book out there that's like, oh yeah, we're going to land on the moon in like 4 years. And it's not like, it doesn't seem like the most unbelievable thing in the world. Like somebody's like, oh yeah, this is probably how that's going to go. You know, isn't that weird? I don't know. It's weird to think about. It's like the people were like imagining this is exactly how this is going to happen before it happens. Before it's like, it seems like such an unbelievable thing. Or that it should have been such an unbelievable thing at the time, but I don't know. And this is pretty close to how it happened. I guess these guys are. I guess it's not implied that they're definitely Americans. But yeah, there's a couple false starts. The rockets blew up. There's like a rock that fell on one of the rockets at a point. And there was one rocket that completely went off course and missed the moon. I guess there were people on all of these rockets, so dang, those are some pretty horrible disasters. Dang, we actually lost a lot of people trying to send people to the moon. I don't know. If that happened, if it was really that dangerous, I don't think anybody would want to do it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But they send 2 astronauts, Colonel Roberts and Major Sims, to the moon, which is basically, what happened in IRL. 2 people went to the moon together. So if we look at the date on this magazine, it says they launched successfully on July 20th, 1970. What's crazy about this, though, okay? What's crazy about this is if you look up the date of the actual moon landing, the moon landing was on July 20th, 1969. Okay? That's insane. They almost got the day right. Okay, I'll tell you. They almost got the day right. Because this is the day of liftoff, and then 2 days later is when they actually land on the moon. So technically, they're predicting July 22nd, 1970 as the moon landing. But, I mean, just the simple fact that this newspaper in here says July 20th, 1970, and it's literally a year. It's the exact date of the moon landing, but a year later. That's just insane to me. That's so wild. I don't know. I don't know. It's crazy. Like, somebody, I don't know. Somebody tell me that's not insane. That's like so crazy to me. That's so weird. Technically, they also, they predicted it would take 2 days. I believe it took like 4 days. To actually from liftoff to landing, 4 to 6 days. But yeah, just think, Major, we'll be the first men to ever set foot on the moon. I don't believe it. And then they see the TARDIS on the moon. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the extent to like the weird connections. And then the rest of it is just the story where these two astronauts, basically they fall in like a crevice. And the doctor, like they see the doctor. Oh, by the way, let me go back because they have these weird like breather masks that the doctor has in like a cupboard, which allows them to just breathe on the moon without any spacesuit or helmet. Obviously, they they do not have these things in the show ever. Whenever we see people in space, they are always wearing full-blown spacesuits, and the reason for that, I think scientifically, is because breathing in space is not the only problem. Okay, it's not just that you can't breathe; it's also that it's extremely cold, as far as I know, and also the pressure is really not suitable for human life or any life whatsoever. So to be without a space helmet and a space suit is actually really bad. It's literally not just air that you need. It's not. You need a lot of other things. You need insulation, you need an enclosed, pressurized environment. So anyways, that's just funny. I just thought it's worth noting because I feel like there's a lot of media that doesn't like fully acknowledge that part of it. That it's like, no, it's just like being underwater. You just need air. That's all you need. It's not really true. And then the doctor has this like little board. Apparently they can communicate with each other because look, they're like talking to each other on the moon, but they have to like they make this like chalkboard to help these guys out of the crevice, and it says, "Hey, you can just jump out because like there's little or no gravity." I think this is supposed to be partially educational, I guess. Hey, did you know that moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's? And then he takes them on board the TARDIS. Weirdly, I don't really know why. He just shows them the TARDIS. He just brings them on. He's like, "Here, look at my TARDIS." And then he explains to them like nobody. He's basically like, "Hey, nobody will believe you if you tell them you saw us on the moon." And they're like, "But aren't you guys the first to technically be on the moon, since you were on the moon before us, before we landed?" And he's like, "Well, you were the first man to set foot on the moon. Although I traveled through time, I cannot change the course of history. Now, gentlemen, I must bid you farewell." Well, I don't know. I feel like that does kind of ruin it, though. If you're, like, literally standing on the moon and somebody else arrives, even if you're a time traveler, like, I don't know. It's kind of cheating, isn't it, I guess? But it's he's saying you're the first man to set foot on the moon, but, like, I don't know how that, like, really differentiates or clarifies. Like, are you saying you're not setting foot on the moon when you're on the moon? Like, that's how that would have to work. It doesn't make any sense, really. But yeah, if I was them, I would be devastated. I'd be like, "Oh my god, we did this big accomplishment, but there's these other people that are just here and ruining the moment, and they just completely ruined our moment, and now we can't even tell people about that. We have to, go back home and be like, well, we were the first people on the moon, and they were celebrating us, but we weren't actually. There were other people on the moon when we got there, so I don't know, kind of ruining their thunder a little bit, you know." But then they leave and they're like, maybe it was space hallucinations and they weren't real after all. We don't know. I don't know. Weird story, but just for the predictive element of it makes it pretty interesting in my book. But yeah, moving on. This next story is called Time in Reverse. This was published in TV Comics 713 to 715, so that's 6 issues. It's also Neville Maine, again, August 9th, 1965, the 23rd of August, 1965. And this is also in that period of time before Season 3, after Season 2. So we're just kind of running these down in order pre-Season 3. Okay? And this was also reprinted in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 22, which is also the same issue in which the moon landing story that we just looked at is published. So... This is an interesting story. So basically, this story is kind of told in reverse, obviously, time in reverse. So the TARDIS lands, and then time kind of starts flowing backwards. It's a really bizarre sort of narrative or storytelling element, I guess, to have basically this story that's going backwards. So everything that they do kind of goes, everything, they originally start with this TARDIS basically being swallowed by the sea, and then they're stuck in the ocean, and then a boat rises from underneath them and then starts going backwards. One thing I want to mention about this is it's not clarified what time period this takes place. Oh, no, it actually is. Back through space and time to the present day. So I was going to say, I think this takes place in the present day, but it literally says here. It takes place in the present day, which at this time would have been August of 1965. Actually, a little bit mind-bending if you start to think about like what this means, that it's sort of a narrated thing to call it the present day. Well, like, what does that mean? Is it just like the fourth wall breaking, sort of like present day by the reader's perspective and our perspectives as outside observers? It's like that's the present day. Because it can't imply that it's the Doctor's and John and Jillian's present day, right? Or else we're implying that John and Jillian's present day is somehow like a few months after Ian and Barbara's like left the TARDIS for the chase, during the chase, and I wouldn't know what to make of that. How could that, unless they joined around August of 1965, unless that's the time in which they originally got on the TARDIS. I don't know. That might cause more problems. I don't know. I'm not. I think the more I think about it, the more confusing that's going to be. But anyways, it's a very simple, straightforward story. Basically, what happens, and I'm skipping straight to the end here. They essentially arrived on this like cliff. This is when the TARDIS technically actually did arrive, and then it fell into the ocean. And then they were captured by these guards. They broke into. They were taken to a prison. I guess this was like a military base or something. They say suppose they thought we were spying on their rockets. They have like strange aerials and rocket launchers. They escape the prison. They hide for a while. They're chased by the guards, and then they escape. They're picked up by some like sea people who help them into a boat, and then that boat sails out into the ocean, and then the boat sinks, and then the TARDIS rises up underneath them. So this is technically like the end of the story. They sail out on this boat, and the boat sinks, and then the TARDIS comes up out of the water because it sank into the water. It fell off that cliff, right? It comes back up, and then they're back in the TARDIS. It's super weird, okay? It's a very simple story, but the kind of like central element of it is that everything happens backwards. So they're trying to like do things backwards in order to like logically get their way to the beginning of the story. But a lot of the time they just kind of get led around. There's one kind of funny element where they're like sneaking back into the prison, like they're led to the prison, right? Because they get out of the boat and then they're kind of like realize that they have to go backwards, so they're being chased from the prison. So the guards chase them kind of back to the prison. They climb back in the prison cell. And then the Doctor has to, like, use a file. He's like, I probably used my file to file these things. And so he's, like, unfiling the bars, which I'm like, how does that even work? How does that even look? I don't even know. But, yeah. And then the guards come, and they're like, stay here, you will stay here. And then they're like, well, I guess this means we're leaving. I guess this means he's going to take us back to where we were captured. And sure enough, that's what happens. They take them back to where they were captured, and they can just walk in the TARDIS because everything's going backwards. So it's a weird story. It's fun. It's actually pretty fun, honestly. I like this story a lot. But if you actually play it backwards, it's a pretty straightforward story. But the only other thing I wanted to say about this is that there's actually no explanation as to why time started moving backwards. Doesn't explain it at all. It just happens. So we just accept that, and we don't question it at all. But yeah, I don't know. It's fine. It's a cute little story. With that, we can just move on. We're kind of breezing through the rest of these. I think it's because a lot of these kind of, like, the first few are pretty long. It goes from like 20 pages to like 12 pages, and then it started going down to like 6 pages and 4 pages. So the comics get smaller and smaller, and are these more smaller stories, so they're quicker to cover. Which brings us to Lizard World. This is published TV Comics 716 through 719. So that's 8 pages long. Also Neville Maine, still still kicking, still doing well. 30th of August 1965 to 20th of September 1965. So this one actually follows through into the first serial of season 3, Galaxy 4. So now we're pushing into season 3. So we're going places. You will notice, because I'm covering these kind of in bulk, that we'll be moving pretty quickly, I think, through a lot of published material. These are the only Doctor Who comics that exist, so if we're pushing into season 3 already, it should go fast. It should be a fast thing to kind of cover all of the TV comics. Like I said, there are the Dalek comics as well, which we'll be covering. There's not nearly as many of them, I think, and I don't think they continued for nearly as long. Doctor Who TV comic kind of kept going for a while. I think all the way through to at least the 4th Doctor era. Like, I think it went pretty far. Obviously kind of evolved and changed in its own right, so we'll be examining that and looking at that. But this is Lizard World. Already we're kind of off to like a cool start. You've got this, they land on this planet, and there's this giant monstrous hand that comes down and picks up the TARDIS. I feel like it might be cooler if they didn't reveal what this was until like later, because you get to see it right here. It's just a goofy-looking giant lizard. Thus the name Lizard World. So in this story, they land on a lizard planet. The lizard actually picks up the Doctor and carries him up to the top of a mountain. So he kind of kidnaps the Doctor. And then John and Gillian actually just climb up this mountain to find him, and then they get put up on top of this pillar. And then it turns out that they're like, oh, we're stuck up here because we can't climb down. It's just a sheer drop. We're on top of like this giant pillar. We're like stranded up here unless the lizard comes back and like takes us down. So they end up escaping the this pillar by basically, the thing is, the lizards, there's a bunch of them, and they come around and they like stare at them for a little bit, and they're like, huh, they're just like, the lizards seem to have no purpose of taking them up on this pillar. Doesn't seem to be a reason for it. They just did it to kind of just look at these weird creatures. And so the Doctor like hypnotizes one of them, and then they just climb down its back. They run into a cave. They see more of these creatures. Creatures start like piling up rocks. I really like, again, the best thing that Neville Maine does is his drawing of weird alien creatures. I know I've said it a bunch of times, but I'm like, look at these. Look at this. This is so cool. Like, this is cool, right? Just the like giant creatures with their giant heads, their giant eyes, just like looking into the cave. I'm like, that is kind of scary. That is scary. And then they're out there, like, they start piling rocks, like they're intelligent, they're smart. It's creepy because they don't talk at all. They're just like these sentient creatures, and we don't know what their desires are. They just like picked up the TARDIS, they picked them up and like put them on top of a pillar. I actually like this story. In hindsight, I actually like this story quite a lot. I was thinking, I'm like, this story's kind of whatever, but it's kind of a cool, if you really like, just chill out with this story. It's just weird. It's no explanation. So basically what they do is they get, stranded in this cave, and so they walk in the other direction of the cave, and that just happens to be where the TARDIS is. So they kind of lucked out there, huh? And I guess they just needed to end the story. I don't know. But they get there just in time because another one of the aliens is like right there, but it doesn't. I guess they somehow outrun it. I don't know. But the implication is because the lizards picked up the TARDIS and put it somewhere anyways, that like, the lizards must have known the TARDIS was in this cave, just on the other side of the cave. But maybe they didn't know the cave went all the way through to the other cave. Who knows? Just a weird coincidence. You might think, I don't know if anybody thinks this, but I wonder if people wonder if like it's possible to even move the TARDIS from like a position, since it's, kind of tied into another dimension without the Doctor like specifically using the controls. And the truth of the matter is, it happens with the TV show. It happens in Marco Polo, specifically. They actually carry the TARDIS with them through through the desert. They call it a caravan. They tie it to like some sort of thing, and then they just pull it around with them on their journey. So the answer seems to be yes. If you were wondering at all about that, whether it's like weird that they could just pick up the TARDIS. Oh yeah, there's this little note where there's an ABC television, so they're starting a new action-based serial based on the Avengers, which is really funny if you don't know what that is, like, or what that means. But it's like it's not referring to again, this is 1965. It's not referring to Marvel's Avengers. I don't even know. I mean, if you were into comic books, you would know about Marvel's Avengers, but otherwise, you might not actually have even heard of the Avengers before. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about, like, back even when I was a kid, it's like until Iron Man came out in like 2000, was it 2006? Iron Man came out. Like a lot of Marvel superheroes were really unknown. Like like most people like don't think knew too many of them. Like I would say you would know Spider-Man, you would probably know the Hulk. I think X-Men was popular because there was a television show. There was a cartoon based around it in the 90s. But like I remember even Captain America wasn't like a super popular character like at all. The most like he had like a little popsicle that you could buy from, like, I remember if the Ice Cream Man came in, there was like a Captain America popsicle, and that's like the most I've heard of Captain America. There's also a Spider-Man popsicle. By the way, I guess if you're British, they're ice lollies, or ice cream, I guess. And ice lolly is probably the more accurate term. I always thought that was kind of interesting. There's these like Marvel superheroes who are like these titans of like everybody's heard of Iron Man now. Everybody's heard of Captain America. Everybody's heard of the Avengers, right? But it's like back in the day, back in like, you know, back in the even here, especially the 1960s, I think the first Avengers comic was probably after that, probably like 60. It probably had just happened, I would say. July 2nd, 1963. Okay, so it would have been 2 years. The first issue of Avengers. But then even the, I don't know, this is kind of not that interesting, maybe. But I remember, like, the Avengers was, like, the big team-up comic that they did. Because they did, because it was a team-up between the Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, and, not Captain America yet. I think it was just Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, and Ant-Man. Yeah, the Wasp was there also. I forgot. I'm trying to avoid going on a whole tangent about that, because I could talk about Marvel comics for frickin' ever, dude. I was a big Marvel Comics guy. I wanted to just make the point that, like, Avengers issues were not, like, super frequent. Because it was a team-up comic, it was kind of like a special event. So I don't think Avengers 2 I don't think it was, like, a monthly issue. I think it was just kind of whenever they felt like it. Yeah, it was 2 months later. They took 2 months to make the second Avengers issue. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting to note, just because they talk about a new series called The Avengers, based on an ABC television show about the Avengers, which is actually a British crime drama called The Avengers. You can look that up if you want. And now we get our first sequel comic to a earlier comic. The first one. You could tell On the Web Planet is a sequel to the TV special, so this is not that. This is a sequel to the Klepton Parasites, our OG Klepton villains, who we are now seeing again for the first time. We're bringing them back. And this is a serial called The Prisoners of the Kleptons. This was actually in the TV Comic Annual of it's called TV Comic Annual 1966. They always kind of numbered it with a year later for some reason, because this was released in September of 1965, 1st of September. It's one of 2 comics in the annual. Again, this is written by Neville Maine. He wrote both of those. Actually, worth noting, we're covering them now, but they were released in the 1st of September. So these are the last 2 Neville Maine comics we're going to cover, we're going to talk about. but technically Lizard World, the last few issues of Lizard World would be the last Neville Maine comics that he released specifically. So keep that in mind. We are not going to see this art style. I mean, this story and the next story, we will see this art style. But after that, we're moving on. We got a new art style. We got a new writer. Everything's different, okay? These are also fully colorized. Interesting, right? I believe this is 4 pages, if I'm not mistaken. The Kleptons, they arrive on this planet, and they see a Klepton ship. Oh, sorry. This is the people. This is a spaceship from Earth that lands on this planet and then gets attacked by the Kleptons. And then the Doctor arrives, and they see this help. They find this pyramid. They also find the ship. They find a flare gun. They see this pyramid, and they see the Klepton. They're like, oh, it's a Klepton. We defeated them at a different moment in time. And then John shoots him with a flare gun, and then they take the thing to get into the Kleptons' city, I guess. But the Kleptons this time actually seem to take control of this. So the fun thing about this story that I will say is that actually we're following up on a thread from the Klepton parasites, which that thread is just the simple fact that this is the Kleptons' home planet. This is where they're from, and if you remember from the Klepton parasites, they explained that their home planet flew too close to the sun, and their people were dying, and they were, it's getting too hot to survive. So they need to escape and find a new place to live. So I guess maybe this is a previous point in time before they went to, I don't know, whatever the planet was called in the Klepton parasites. I don't think we got its name, but they basically are like, hey, you got to help us invade Earth. we're gonna go there. Which I don't know. Why didn't they go to Earth? They never went to Earth. I guess they're stopped here. And then they put them over this like boiling vat of oil, I think. Boiling oil. Last thing that happens, John basically fires his flare gun at the boiling oil. I guess it's like, I don't know, this is kind of a stupid panel. It's like, I guess he does it as a distraction, but I guess that's the whole thing. Like, he's trying to distract them so they can't see, I guess, as they like start shifting this little basket that they're on out, and then they escape. And it's just kind of everything happens so fast. That's the resolution, is just, I don't even know what they needed to create the fire. The only reason I can think of is it creates a distraction, but they literally just climb out and leave. And then they escape and they leave, and that's the whole thing. I mean, this is a simple story because it's only 4 pages long. These are very short tales. But we get 2 different stories, but they're both really short. So the next one is the Caterpillar Men. And again, same thing. This is TV Comic Annual, is included in the same annual. Everything is the same about it. And this is all before Galaxy 4. We're in that in-between time between seasons 2 and 3 of Doctor Who Classic, right? This is the last Neville Maine comic we're going to cover. This one's kind of whatever as well. So essentially, these Caterpillar Men, they're called Caterpillar Men. They have a caterpillar ship. And they're basically capturing scientists, and then they capture the Doctor. And the Doctor is like talks to the scientists. He's like, hey, we have to fight the Caterpillar Men. Meanwhile, John and Gillian are out in the woods, and they discover this like dome made of silk. But they can't get through. This is where the scientists are. But John has an idea. And this is really very silly. They basically go out and they find this pest control office, I believe. It's WPCO. I don't know what the W stands for, but it's pest control. And he's like, hey, John goes up to this guy. He's like, hey, a World Pest Control offices. He's like, our grandfather's been captured by Caterpillar Men. And he's like, oh, I heard about them. Yeah, we'll go use our sprays and kill all the caterpillars. And then they do that, and they kill all the caterpillars. And that just ends the story. The story just ends. It's like, later, after receiving the thanks of the freed scientists, John and Gillian leave with Doctor Who in the TARDIS. That was a good idea of yours, John. I couldn't have done better myself. I'm proud of you. Again, a really short story, but it's just kind of funny how like quickly it wraps up, as if there was supposed to be a little bit more to the story, and they're just like, no. What if we just have them like find a guy that can spray pesticide at the Caterpillar Men? I suppose they just kill the Caterpillar Men. It's like it just works, I guess. They're just absolutely annihilated by this pesticide. Very funny. But again, this is the last Neville Main issue, and so what we have to do is we have to appreciate his alien designs. The Caterpillar Men, probably not the coolest. I do like that they have this kind of like webbing over their eyes, and I'm not entirely sure what's happening here. He's like hypnotizing the Doctor or something. Oh, the rays from their eyes are making us powerless. That's what that is. They make them powerless. They're able to sap their strength, I guess, using their eye magics. But yeah, that's the Caterpillar Man. Again, these two are kind of weak just because they're just they're four pages in an annual. They weren't supposed to be like big stories or anything, just kind of these short little like tidbits. Also these two were not republished anywhere. So the Doctor Who Classic Comics never received these. They were never published in Classic Comics. So again, the only way to read them is to just literally search for them on your own. Again, I also wanted to mention, I did write this down, that this apparently takes place in the year 2035, which is kind of wild. We've got men in a space station, and they're looking at these aliens invading the Earth. In 2035, so this is 10 years from now, guys. A decade from now, we're going to have space stations. Everybody's going to be chilling on space stations. We're going to see giant caterpillar aliens attack the Earth. That's going to all happen in 10 years. I mean, it's wild to think about, because at the time, this would have been 70 years. They're, like, predicting 70 years from now, but now we are in 2024. You know, it's just, like, that's beyond what most people can even imagine being, like, oh man, I can't even imagine what it's gonna be like in 2035. That's so far away. But you know, now it seems kind of silly to think of that as like a distant future. Okay, so this is where these comics get sort of annoying. Okay, for mainly one big reason. So this is when Bill Mevin took over. Okay, this is a new artist, a new writer, and he's doing all of this. The problem is here that these are 2-page comics. They're still 2 pages. You'll note from the previous comics that we've read so far, the others were all 2 pages per issue as well, but they decided to do these as like spanning pages. So now when you try to go find these, you can only find them kind of in this format. They can't split them up really. They have to present them as this like wide image, just because that's the way it was formatted. I hate this. I think this sucks. Especially because like if I want to read this in like on like a tablet or something, it just doesn't work as well. Every time it like wants to flip the image. I tried to do that. I couldn't, because the images I was finding, I tried to put on my Fire tablet, and like it would not, for some reason it wasn't keeping the resolution. It's like when I saved the images, it was like downscaling the resolution to the point where I couldn't read them. Even if I zoomed in, it would like make them all pixely and blocked out, and I'm like, why is it doing this? I don't know why it was doing that. It was pissing me off though. And I actually couldn't read them on my tablet anyways, as much as I really wanted to. I wanted to go to the park and just chill and read a bunch of these comics, but no, it was not easy to do. Anyways, I haven't said anything about this dumb story yet. But this is TV Comics 720 to 723. This is 3 issues, so we're talking 6 pages, but they're all like this, so we're going to see 3 of these. Well, I have seen 3 of these. I don't know if I'm trying to avoid showing you all of these, just because I don't know about the actual rights to any of this stuff. So this was published from the 27th of September 1965 to the 18th of October 1965. And we are full-blown season 3 now. It starts a little bit, this is published during Galaxy 4 and continues to be published and through to the Mythmakers. And the Mythmakers is notable because it is, again, a big companion change serial. We disembark Vicky on in the Mythmakers. Vicky leaves as a companion, who, again, we haven't talked about her yet in the actual show, in the context of the show, but Vicky leaves there, and we pick up a new companion, a very short-lived companion, which is Katarina. Again, well, I am being very heavily spoilery. I'm sorry, but I assume most people have probably watched this era of the show, right? I assume. We'll talk about it. We will talk about them, but it's a short-lived companion. But anyways, let's talk about this thing. I did find these ones a little irritating to read, just because, again, I hate the format. His art style is interesting. I feel like he does have the Doctor. It's a little more lifelike, somewhat. Especially this panel, especially. I feel like that very much looks like the first Doctor. So does this side profile. He's almost got them kind of perfect. But then again, it kind of makes John and Gillian look a little bit out of place, I guess, because he doesn't have a reference to use for them. It makes the Doctor look a little bit uncanny, I will say, but he looks very much like the first Doctor for sure. And like I said, I mentioned this before, I think he writes Gillian a lot better. You'll see how much Gillian talks in this specific panel. I hope it's Mars, and then she says, I don't hope it's Mars. Obviously, already being, having more agency than she's had in any of these other issues. It looks interesting. Let's find out. And then, that's funny, a lovely big city like this, but there aren't any people about. Where have they all gone? Grandfather, what is that thing in your hand? She's still, inquisitive, but to the point where she's, finding out information. She's, learning stuff. She's written as a lot smarter, a lot more intelligent. She's actually saying things. She's actually doing something. So I am glad for this contribution that Bill Mevin is giving to the character. He's actually giving her a character and a personality, which he really didn't have before. And I kind of overrated how much John did, but John did stuff. He like we talked about in even the last issue, the Caterpillar Men. It was John that goes and talks to the pest control guy. In Prisoners of the Kleptons, it's John that has the flare gun and he shoots the oil. In Lizard World, it's John's idea to basically climb the mountain after the Doctor. It's all of these things are John doing those things. Gillian is just kind of there. She just exists. So she's much better already. Even just this 2-page thing, she's so much better. I'm finally, she has a reason to be here, a reason to be around. And this does very much, it kind of parallels, it's a pretty standard dynamic, I would say. I don't know why it's such a standard dynamic. It feels for, the when you have, a boy and a girl, for the boy to kind of be this meat-headed, hero type. He's kind of dumb, but he means well, and he always does the right thing. And, he's kind of the hero, and he'll do the brave thing. And the girl's kind of the smart, snarky one, who's, kind of you boys need to stop being so dumb. I know all the answers. I'm the smart one. I'm the intelligent one, right? This is, such a common dynamic in, media, I feel like. Am I crazy? It's the Ben 10. It's Ben 10. Avatar. Avatar The Last Airbender kind of has that dynamic. I would say, Harry Potter, especially. Harry Potter's dynamic is kind of similar to, Avatar's, isn't it, in a way? So the girl's always just the smart one, the reasonable, logical one, where the boys are just kind of these idiots who just, bumble around like dummies. I don't know, it's a standard dynamic. I don't know why. I feel like it is, though. I feel like maybe I'm crazy, but I also feel like maybe I'm not. And that is a standard dynamic. So I wouldn't call it like especially like inspired. But it works, it works. And I'm comfortable with it because I feel like I've seen it so many times. Anyways, Ordeals of Demeter is what this story is called. There's basically these robots from the planet Bellis. These evil robots, and they're at war with the people of Demeter. The Doctor arrives on the planet Demeter, and he's very familiar. He's like, I think this must be the planet Demeter. And I do want us to pay close attention to the fact that we have come way beyond Mars. This is not Mars. We've come way beyond Mars. They think they're going to Mars, but they've gone a little past Mars. And then they decide to explore. But the Doctor knows Demeter. He's been here before. And so he brings this, like, star, this, like, weird star. But the people of Demeter, they basically, like, detect the TARDIS, which I don't know if that makes much sense. They detect the TARDIS, even though the TARDIS usually just kind of apparates, like, very, like, just in the middle of nowhere. It just appears, right? It's like, can you really detect it arriving on, like, a radar? I don't know. It's almost as if they're, like, pretending it's flying through space and just landed like a spaceship would, but that's not really how the TARDIS works, so I don't know. I don't know that I like that so much, but, whatever. And then they're supposedly captured. I mean, they are captured. They think they're baddies because they're at war, remember? So we're going to skip the middle page, but essentially what happens is the Doctor explains to them, hey, I'm a friend to Demeter. I've got this star. If we remember the star, he shows them the star. And they're like, oh, you are a friend to Demeter. Well, we're at war. And they invite them to, like, a banquet, and then an earthquake happens. And essentially they get separated from Jillian. Oh, actually, that's here. They get separated from Jillian during this earthquake. They run out of the building. Like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Oh, this is actually more than 3 pages. It's 4 pages. I was like, wait, this isn't the ending. Yeah, they get separated from Jillian. She, as you can see in this panel, she runs away with the chief guy, the Emperor, sorry. And then the Doctor and John run back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor uses this thing called the Tremulator. And it's a little unclear, but it seems like what the Tremulator does is that it stops earthquakes, which is wild. Apparently, the Doctor just stops an earthquake. So Jillian is taking refuge, but the Doctor signals to them. He sends up some signal rockets, and they're like, oh, it's safe now. And then they go back, and Jillian's reunited, and the Doctor reveals that his Tremulator actually, not only does it stop the earthquakes, but it created this tornado that's basically going to, like, shoot back whatever the Bellis robots were sending their way to attack them, and basically blows up the planet Bellis. And we just blow up Bellis, and we kill all those damn evil robots, and that's fine. There's a couple things to talk about with this. They give Jillian, and they give they give it to the Doctor, this like jewel. It's a sign of good luck. I don't know the significance of this. It just seems to be like a random thing. They're like, oh, here's a cool jewel. I'm like, this could be a cool little, like, prop to put in the background of scenes sometimes to just keep that, keep the canon sort of running, or bring this jewel back up in a later issue. I don't know if they do that, but, maybe we'll see it again. I don't know. Not within these comics, because we've only got the last 3 to do here. So this is, there are 2 more after this one to cover. And so, yeah, we get this jewel. I don't know. I don't see it in the next 2 stories, but, maybe it's significant that we mark off that we have this jewel, I guess. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about, there's 2 other things, actually. First of all, I think this story is, like, a little bit more complicated than, like, the other stories. There's, a lot going on. I feel like there's a lot that happens, even though this is, 3 panels. I feel like Neville Maine, he kept his stories rather simple for the most part. Didn't try to do way too much. But I feel like so much happens in this. and a lot of it is like in between. Like, this is only 4 issues, and a lot of the stuff that's happening is like just kind of implied to be happening. Like, for instance, we see these two. The last we see them is here, and they're running away, and they're trying to get everybody aboard something. Yeah, I don't know. They don't even say. Oh, I guess they're getting on this boat or whatever, right? 'Cause they just show it in the background. Okay. So that's where they are, and then they're just here, right? And that's the next we see of them. I don't know. Maybe that's not a great example, but it's just, it feels like that's a whole thing, and then the Doctor gets split off, and they're doing a whole thing, and they're like, well, we got to signal to them, and we got to activate the tremulator, and I don't know. It feels like there's so much happening in all of these stories that it's just like, it's like, tone it down a little bit. Like, we didn't need to, we could have spent a little bit of time, like, world building the people of Demeter. Like, let's learn more about them. We don't really know that much about them. It's just, we didn't know anything about the robots of Bellis or why they were at war. I don't know any of that. It's just like, on to the next beat, and let's solve this problem. Let's solve this problem. New problem, new problem, new problem. So, I think Bill Mevin's a little bit more frenetic. Whereas Neville Maine was a little bit more toned down, whereas he was, like, writing, each 2-page issue had, like, kind of one problem, or the whole thing had, like, one problem. It just had less problems to deal with. I don't know. Hopefully I explained that well enough, what I mean. I don't really know if I did. But I did want to talk about the fact that I did some research here, because I found it interesting that the planet's name was Demeter. I found that really interesting. I'm like, okay, Demeter is a Greek god, and I'm like, well, we do name the planets after not Greek gods, but Roman gods, which are just other names for Greek gods. So I was like, it would be interesting to look up Demeter, and then to look up, because Demeter is a god. I believe it's the god of agriculture. It's the Greek god of agriculture. So I was like, what's the Roman name for Demeter? Because we use the Roman names of Greek gods, right? So, like, Zeus is a Greek god. As a Roman god, his name is Jupiter, right? And then they're like Poseidon, right? Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. His Roman name is Neptune, right? So we use all of these, like, little things. Venus is Aphrodite. Mars, the god of war, is Ares. I think that's more than enough examples. So I was like, okay, well, we wouldn't name a planet Demeter. We would probably name that planet after the Roman name for Demeter, which I looked up, and the Roman name for Demeter is Ceres, Ceres. I'm like, that's probably what we would have named the planet. And so I looked this up, and it's funny because there is a planet called Ceres. It's a dwarf planet. And do you remember back when I drew attention to the specific fact that they went a little beyond Mars? We've come way beyond Mars. I think this must be the planet Demeter. Well, isn't it interesting that the planet Ceres, which again is the Roman name for Demeter, is in between Mars and Jupiter? It's like, technically, it's in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and it's a dwarf planet called Ceres. I was like, huh? I wonder if that's a coincidence, or if they did that on purpose. I don't know. That would be like a kind of a crazy coincidence, right? But they called it Demeter, so I don't know if I don't know. But I just thought that was really interesting that, like, that kind of, like, connects in a weird way. There's a connection there. I don't know what to make of it. But yeah, that's about it for the ordeals of Demeter. So the next story is Enter the Go Ray. I will say these last 3 stories I don't nearly like. I don't think I like them as much. The only thing I like is that Jillian is a little bit more, she's doing more stuff. Like, she's saying things. But, like, overall, I don't like these stories as much. There's too much going on. They're a little too, like, they expand the scope a little too much, where they should keep things simple, and they don't. Or I say I did Bill Mevin. So Enter the Go-Ray was published in TV Comics 724 to 727. So again, this is a 4 issues. Also, Bill Mevin, October 25th, 1965 to November 15th, 1965. And then this was airing during the Myth Makers, and it ends during the Dalek Master Plan, which the Daleks Master Plan is pretty significant because it's a huge story. It's probably the biggest Doctor Who serial to date. It spanned over several episodes, and also includes a kind of like holiday special like in the middle of it, called the Feast of Stephen, I believe, which has nothing to do, but it's a large narrative where the TARDIS goes several different places. It's a very complex story. But in it, we lose Katarina. If you remember, she kind of just joined, and then we lost her. And there's a new companion that I'm going to include because she's present for basically the rest of the serial. So Katarina Katarina leaves, and then they pick up this new character named Sarah Kingdom, who is significant because she is considered one of the Doctor's companions, despite the fact that she was only present for this serial. But like I said, these serials are several episodes, so she's present for like 10 to 12 episodes. And she literally exists only because they wanted to. They were annoyed by the fact that they would have to write Katarina, because Katarina is from the Mythmakers serial is about the city of Troy during the Trojan War. So she's from ancient Greece. And they were like, well, this is actually going to be difficult because we're going to have to explain so many things to this character because she's way out of time, that she's not even like present day. She doesn't even know about modern science. And they were like, that's going to be a really annoying thing to write. So they literally write Katarina out of the show and replace her with an entirely different female character named Sarah Kingdom, who they also write out of the show during Dalek's Master Plan. But I'm only noting this because significant changes in the Doctor Who main canon are worth talking about. And again, in this context, it's not super important, but I like to say it. I like to bring it up just so that we know where we're kind of at in the overall canon that is the show airing. Okay, so we're there. The first thing I want to say about Enter the Go-Ray is I hate the name. The name makes no sense. 'Cause Enter the Go-Ray as if like the Go-Ray is a thing, but the Go-Ray is a people. Actually, no, the Go-Ray are the Go-Ray's the planet. So Enter the Go-Ray. It's the planet Go-Ray, which is a stupid name for a planet. But then there's the people of Go-Ray that look like this. I guess I don't know if I like Bill Mevin's alien designs. They're not that much different. I just think these aliens are stupid because they're like I can't tell what they are. I think they're like robotic because they have these like wheels. They don't have legs. They have these wheels and they look kind of like metal and robotic. I don't know. I think it's just that's the main issue I have with it is logically I can't tell what this actually is because the wheel really throws everything off. But it's like it's this significant story element is that these aliens, they don't have legs, they have wheels. Okay? Anyways, they go to planet Go-Ray and they're like, "Oh, this is crazy. We can like jump really high or whatever." And it turns out that it's cuz the planet Go-Ray is powered by this cardium. And so they go into the city, and at first people are like scared of them because they have legs, and they're like, that's weird that you have legs because we don't have legs. And he's like, hey, people haven't been here for hundreds of years and they've never seen legs. Which also we're at the point where Bill Mevin likes to write the First Doctor as if he like knows everything about this planet. Like he shows up, he's like, oh, I know this planet, I know these people. Which I don't think he did in the Neville main comics. Did he do that at all? Now I'm trying to remember, and I'm like, I don't think he actually did that. I think it is Bill Mevin that like writes the First Doctor this way, and like, he just knows everything. But they show up, he knows the planet, he knows what their culture is like, He's familiar with it. He's been here before. But this was I kind of hated the way they actually do this like transition here, because they're like, oh, let's go visit the reactor or the generator or whatever, and they go in and there's an explosion, and there's this one panel. Suddenly, as they're about to go inside, there's an explosion, and then they run away. And like this like confused the heck out of me, because this happens so fast that like it's like the whole plot hinges on this element that like they are blamed for this reactor blowing up. But I got so confused because I think I read over this like really quickly, and I was like, wait, why are they even after them? Like, what would they even do wrong? Why'd they get thrown in prison? And it's because they think they blew up this reactor. That's why. So you got to like pay attention, I guess, to that. It's just that it happens so fast. They're like, let's go to the reactor, and then it just explodes for no reason. Apparently for no reason. And the other thing about it is the rest of this story is them trying to be like, oh, we need to... No, that's what confused me. They go to, They go to, like, find Mercury, and they're like, let's get Mercury to power their Cardium, and then they'll forgive us. I'm like, why do they need... What's wrong with the generator? It's because it blew up. I'm like, of course. The generator blew up. That's why they need some alternative source of power now. If they go to a cave, they find Mercury. John touches it with his hand, which I was like, oh, that might be dangerous. That might be dangerous to do. I looked it up. Turns out it's probably not that dangerous to touch Mercury with your hand. You just shouldn't do it like a lot or often. But overall, you'd probably be okay doing that. But they grab Mercury in this cave and in this puddle, which is also very similar to the Dalek story where they needed Mercury to pilot the TARDIS. It's a little bit. They were looking for Mercury. But in this story, they get it to power the reactor. They're confronted by these the guards, these Go-Ray people at the entrance of the cave where they found the Mercury. And John brought some marbles with him, and then they use the marbles, and then it foils these guards because it must suck to just have to wheel around on a singular wheel all the time. Like, how are you supposed to keep your balance? And then they run to basically sneak into the reactor, and they're like, we're wearing suits, so they'll think like, they won't be able to tell we're two-legged. But then they are discovered, and the guards the guards trap them in the machine, in the reactor for some reason. I don't know, that really makes much sense. So Doctor Who starts laying down some pipe. Sorry. Anyways, he lays down a pipe, and then he puts it into the reactor, and then he pours the Mercury in, which I don't know. This is like presented as like a cliffhanger that like, oh, I see what we can do now. We have some pipe, and it's just so he can use it to transfer the Mercury to the machine. I guess it's because the Mercury's really heavy, because the reactor's running out of power. So like they're now less strong. Like the if you remember, the reactor makes everyone more powerful or something. I don't understand it. I honestly, the Bill and Evan comics are kind of frustrating, aren't they? They're kind of frustrating because they're like they're not very good. I guess I don't like them very much. I'm only now realizing it. Because that is stupid. Like, that doesn't even make sense. And then it's like, why? Okay, so we gotta, like, the whole conflict is we gotta lay down this pipe. We could have done without this section of, like, well, I have this great idea. If we put these pipes together, I don't have to move the box. And it's like, okay, yeah, obviously. You don't have to draw too much attention to that. And then the doctor talks to them, and he's like, hey, you don't have to arrest us. I replaced your generator with Mercury, and now it powers really well. You could have just left it there, really, and just been like, oh, thank you, actually, that's great. We didn't realize it, you actually helped us out. But no, he then, like, takes a magnet and, like, uses it to move the Go-Ray guy so that he proves to him that he's, like, a magic man and that he should let them go. because he's a magic man, and they're like, oh, you are definitely a magic man. I guess we'll let you go. It's like, why add that extra element? It's like, I guess they just needed to pad out the rest of the panels, just add something else to happen. I don't know. I'm like, that's weird. Like, I don't think we need that section. But, you know, it's also heavily implies that they are made of metal. It's like he says he's only using it to move his wheel, to move him left and right. But, and I guess that's fine, but then you're implying that the wheel is made of metal? So they are kind of like at least partially robotic. Unless they're just made of metal. They're like beings made of metal. I don't know, man. This bothers the heck out of me. I can't. It's hard. It's hard. I don't love Edge of the Go-Ray. Again, I think it's kind of a whatever story. I don't really like the Go-Ray people all that much. They're kind of dumb. They just blame them because they're like weird looking, and you know they come out of the reactor just as it explodes. There's a lot of like convenient plot elements that are just kind of stupid and contrived. I don't know. Anyways, did I mention this was republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 7? Did I mention that? Because it's worth mentioning. As I said, they're completely out of order. You'll notice these are like after a lot of the other comics. Like the latest, I think, in the Neville Maine comics was published in issue 22. So now this one was published in issue 7, as was Ordeals of Demeter, by the way, if I didn't mention it. Both of those stories were published in Classic Comics number 7. But anyways, that's Enter the Go-Ray, and that brings us to our final comic. Man, I'm glad it's over. How long are we looking at right now? Oh my God, 3 hours, 3.5 hours I've been sitting here recording this. That is way longer than I thought this was going to take. I definitely didn't think I'd have that much to say about this stuff, but I guess it is a lot more comics than I thought, which is probably why part of the reason I was a little weary of talking about these, because it is a lot, but I didn't know how else to divide them, really. I could divide them by the author, but I don't know. Maybe that would have been the better way to go, but I feel like Bill Mevin does a lot less of them. Let me look up, because I did write this. I did keep track of this. Yeah, so Neville Maine does 12 comics, and Bill Mevin does 7. Yeah, it wouldn't have made sense to do that, because he did so many. Like, the third... so, yeah, Neville Maine did 12, Bill Mevin did 7, and then the next guys did like a ton. They were on for way longer, to the point where we're going through 12 First Doctor comics, just First Doctor comics, and then they did like, God, I don't even know, I can't even count right off the top of my head how many this is Second Doctor comics they did. So there's a bunch in this list that I'm looking at, so that would be a lot. It wouldn't really make sense to divide things that way, so I think it was best that I did it by year, really, because it does limit it to a very, like, specific round number, like a very kind of manageable number, at least. So, yeah, but this is the last one we're going to be covering, and this is TV comic 728 to 731. Again, Bill Mevin, 22nd of November, 1965 to 13th of December, 1965. So we cut it off here, just to keep consistency with just, you know, how I did the Klepton Parasites, because Klepton Parasites started in 64, and I was like, well, if we do the next one ends in 66, so I'm like, that would make sense to keep that and push it over into the next thing, just because that's how we started with Klepton Parasites. That's just information for me, but, you know. And this entirely aired during the Daleks' Master Plan. Again, really, really long serial, so not surprising. 4 issues long, and this was republished in Doctor Who Classic Comics number 10, which so far I have been going back and checking if any of these share a Doctor Who Classic Comics issue. I've pointed out the ones that did, and most of them were just like consecutive. None of the rest of them did. Most of these don't. I think like 2 of them do. But anyways, again, this story's kind of like it's a little too much. There's a little too much going on. They land on this planet, and yeah, they don't know where it is. It's a desolate planet. But the TARDIS starts sinking under the ground, and then they go in a cave, and then they like there's like a crab that jumps out of the water and grabs John. As they're putting flippers on, by the way. Luckily, they were putting flippers on. And the doctor brings an electrolyzer, whatever the heck that is, and shocks the crab so it releases John. But also, they found out at some point, the water contains so much oxygen that they can literally breathe in the water. So they don't need, like, a breathing apparatus. Just real weird. And then they get caught in seaweed. Oh, no. They swim through the bottom of this water and they end up falling into space. Like there's just a pocket of air underneath somehow. This scientifically makes 0 sense. There's absolutely no way that could happen. But, you know, whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know. I feel like it's not the strangest thing they could do in a Doctor Who episode if they, like, swam through water and then they ended up underneath the water and there was just a pocket of air. And, like, there's probably a reason for that. It's never explained in this why. It's just kind of a weird quirk of the planet that's a thing that can happen, I guess. But they meet these frog people who start climbing aboard the TARDIS, and they're like, we're going to use it as bait to trap a giant shark that keeps, like, trying to kill us and jumping out of the water. It's in this upside down water, and there's a shark, and it keeps jumping out and eating the frogs, and they're like, we're going to trap him by using this flashing light on the top of the TARDIS. And the doctor's like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do that, and we'll help you create some nets or whatever. And then the shark comes, and we're going to skip the next page. So they catch the shark, and then they're gifted. The frog people gift them, like, seahorses that they then ride, and then they get captured by an octopus. Sorry. They lose control of the seahorse because John and Gillian go on the seahorse by themselves. Doctor just lets them go off. And then they lose control of it, and then they get thrust into, like, a octopus creature, like, grabs them. And the Doctor tickles the octopus. John gets grabbed by the octopus. The Doctor runs up, and he tickles it with a feather, and the octopus then releases them. But at this stage, they go back to where the TARDIS was. TARDIS not there anymore. So they're like, oh, where is it? And then Gillian starts falling in quicksand. God, this is so stupid. Is it? I don't like these ones as much. I'm sorry. These are like, it's too much. This is just chaos. It's just random chaos, dude. There's no, like, consistency. It's just this bizarro world where nothing makes any sense at all. But anyways, the TARDIS apparently, you know, it drifts through this quicksand. And they meet this guy, the Ancient Mariner, who's apparently, like, stranded for millennia, for years. And then he took the TARDIS. He's like, oh, maybe I can live in this. It's a nice house for me to live. And they're like, no, we'll build you a house, and then we'll take our TARDIS. Which, by the way, is pretty funny because he's saying he's shipwrecked, and, like, they could probably, like, take him anywhere. And they're like, no, we'll build you a house. Well, yeah, we'll just build you a house down here. You can stay down here. We'll just leave, you know. And yeah, okay. And the story just ends. So too much. It's just chaos, pure chaos. I don't love these stories so far, but that's the last one that I read so far. We will continue this quite a bit later. We have a couple other things to cover. In the meantime, I'm glad I finally got through this, man. I've been putting this off for too long. Like, holy crap, I mean, I didn't think the recording was going to take this long, but I did think, like, I don't know, I just thought, I genuinely thought I wasn't going to have enough things to say about it. Now I'm like, you know, it's because it's a lot. And it's hard to remember that many. That's like 15 comics. It was really tough to, like, have some of those stories, because some of those stories are really insignificant to have them like stick in my mind in any way. So yeah, it's probably good that I read all of them twice. That probably helped. But if I hadn't done that, I definitely would have forgotten like several of these, or at least not really, remembered any details about them. But yeah, I think the next thing I'm going to be doing on this channel specifically, like I said, I do a lot of things. I have a main channel, Antixessus. Please look it up. I do Let's Plays. I do all sorts of things. I've been playing a game with a friend of mine recently. And I've been playing a game on my own. I might upload some like Reddit reactions, some stuff like that. That's kind of the thing that I do over there. If you're interested in that, this channel I kind of just repurposed into this Doctor Who book club thing. I don't know if I'm gonna do anything else with it. I used to do drink reviews on it, but I don't know if I kind of got bored with those. So yeah, we're just gonna keep going along on this. And I hope, I don't want it to be as slow moving as it is, but some of these are a lot, and I want it to move pretty fast. But I guess the thing is, like, I don't want to take too much time in between these, more so than I care about like the speed at which we're moving, I guess. But as soon as we get to the end of season 3, I think the end of season 3, or is it the beginning of season 4, where we get the second Doctor. It's beginning of season 4. So, yeah, I mean, the faster we move through that, like, we should start getting somewhere pretty quickly, I think. But yeah, like I said, we're covering season 2 next. I will try to get that out as quickly as I can, but that's kind of a large undertaking for the most part, but, I'll try to do it. How many episodes is that? It's 39. There's 39 episodes, so it is a lot, actually, for season 2, but they are divided into serials, so it shouldn't be... I think I did okay with the Season 1 discussion. I think I did all right with it. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you did watch, please, leave a like, subscribe, but also just tell me what you think of this and how much you care about me continuing it. I'm kind of like, viewership's been kind of low, but this is a channel that I don't use very often, so it's kind of, to be expected. And I do think, as the library kind of increases of these episodes, it might, start picking up in attention. Or it might not. Or maybe people don't care about this. That's fine. That's okay. But I might dip into other series as well. I just kind of want to get as deep into this one as possible, or different franchises, I mean. I want to get as deep into this one as possible before I start, putting more on myself there. Anyways, that's all. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.